I'm a 30-something professional. Being in your 30s these days doesn't mean you're an old bachelor anymore. We live in an era where marriage isn't considered a must. I had a girlfriend until last year, but we broke up after I found out she was seeing someone else. Since then, I've been worried about trusting women, but recently, something enjoyable happened. I can't help but live this way, and I thought I'd share that special something here. I live in a small apartment about a 5-minute walk from the subway station. The place is old, but the landlord recently redid the wallpaper and flooring, so it's quite clean. I'm pretty experienced in living on my own, so I manage well. Since moving in, I've fixed the undersink cabinet and the shoe rack by myself, and even managed to completely remove the mold in the bathroom. One weekend, as I was relaxing and watching TV, the lady from next door knocked on my door. She appeared to be in her 50s and asked if I had a monkey wrench because she needed to replace her shower head, but couldn't find one at the local hardware store. I had a set of tools and lent her the wrench. About an hour later, she returned it, thanking me, and handed me a bag of garlic baguettes she bought from the bakery in front of our building. It's nothing, we're neighbors after all, I said, trying to refuse the gift, but she insisted, holding my hand tightly. My husband is too lazy to fix anything. I asked him to buy a wrench, but he forgot and just slept all day. I fixed the shower myself. My friends' husbands change light bulbs and do repairs without a fuss. She seemed quite talkative. I thanked her for the food and went back to my room. I ended up falling asleep while watching YouTube, and before I knew it, it was evening. I was too lazy to cook, so the garlic baguettes came in handy for a meal. I thought I should buy her some juice next time I see her. A few days later, she came by again, worried because her washing machine had stopped working, and she couldn't get through to customer service over the phone. Although it was a bit of a hassle, I went over to her place. Maybe the circuit breaker tripped, I suggested. Oh, I hadn't thought of that, she exclaimed. Sure enough, the laundry room's switch had been flipped off. She was relieved to see the washing machine start working again after flipping the switch back on. As I was leaving, she said, "Wait, I have some golden kiwis I bought from the store. Take some with you," and gave me 5 of them. I tried to refuse, saying, "You don't have to give me anything in return. I'm happy to help without any gifts." But she insisted. After that, we occasionally ran into each other. One day, the boiler broke down and she asked if she could shower at my place because fixing it immediately wasn't an option. I suggested boiling water or going to a nearby sauna, but she said the sauna was closed that day, and she once got burned by spilling a boiling kettle as a child. So she was too scared to handle hot pots. "I'll cook something delicious for you after you shower," I said, and she went into the bathroom. She hummed a tune while washing up and emerged looking rejuvenated. It was the first time I saw her without makeup. Her skin was flawless and her figure, though petite, was remarkably toned. At that moment, I saw her in a new light, and we connected on a deeper level. She joked, "I've tried everything to catch a handsome young man's eye, and nothing worked. But today, my plan succeeded." When I asked about her husband, she said, "Don't worry, he's on a business trip for a few days." She asked if I wanted tortillas, and when I mentioned I also liked broccoli soup, she brought ingredients from her house to cook at mine. She was quick and skilled in the kitchen, and we enjoyed the meal together. We spent every day together until the day before her husband was due back. She offered to iron my shirts, saying, "You don't have much to take care of living alone. Let me do it." But I insisted, "I'm better at ironing. You should just relax and enjoy your visit." Living in an area surrounded by shops and markets, she suggested visiting a massage chair salon run by a friend of hers. We agreed to go in the evening to avoid the morning crowd of elderly visitors. Upon arriving, her friend, seeing me, exclaimed, "Wow, so young and handsome. Emily must have praised you to the skies." I was taken aback and looked at Emily. "Sophia, stop it and let us try the massage chairs," she said. We chose the full course, and Sophia explained that these bed-style massage machines were more popular than traditional massage chairs. She had to squeeze the leg compression massagers onto my legs, joking that whoever ended up with me was lucky, which was embarrassingly flattering. After enduring the playful teasing from the ladies at the salon, I felt refreshed and relaxed from the massage, despite not having exercised separately from work. The next day, I visited the salon again after work without telling Emily, and Sophia seemed quite surprised. I had such a good night's sleep after using the massage chair. "I just had to come back for more," I said. The lady, Sophia, was about to close up shop for the evening, but seeing a handsome young man walk in, she decided she needed to call her husband and tell him she'd be home late. Feeling a bit guilty, I offered to come back another time, but she insisted it was fine and called her husband anyway. I have 2 customers who came in for a trial session, explaining everything and going through. The process will take at least an hour and a half. "Don't wait up for me, just eat dinner on your own," she told him over the phone. The thought that she might be hungry because of me made me feel somewhat bad. When you do this kind of work, you adjust to the customers' schedules. "It's fine if I eat later, so please, enjoy your session," Sophia reassured me. She turned on the heat function of the massage chair, and I ended up falling asleep during the session, entering a dreamlike state. In this state, I felt Sophia looking at me with a smile, which was somewhat unsettling considering my hands and legs were restrained by the massage equipment, and I wasn't covered by a blanket. After the session, she mentioned locking up the store and suggested moving to a sofa massage chair to chat for a bit. I agreed. Once the full session was over, she led me to the sofa massage chair and draped a blanket over me. Sophia's earnest gaze somehow made me feel like I was burning through my youth. A few days later, I ran into Emily, the neighbor lady. "I heard you visited Sophia's place. Why didn't you tell me? You went alone." "Yeah, the massage chairs are pretty good. My place is too small to have one, so I plan to go there occasionally," I replied. Sophia was so happy to have a handsome guest visit her shop. "Let's go together next time, haha," she suggested. I couldn't tell how much Sophia and Emily had shared with each other. Shouldn't secrets be kept among close friends? My mind was so cluttered after meeting Emily that I couldn't even focus on work. I came up with a plan to keep the ladies from spilling too many secrets. I suggested to Emily, "Let's all have dinner and hang out with Sophia." We set a date, and it felt like a bond was forming. We decided to treat each other like sisters. We had steak for dinner and enjoyed a few drinks, which left us feeling quite merry. "Should we all stay together tonight?" I suggested. The ladies loved that idea. It was an entirely new experience for me, but it turned out to be quite extraordinary. We all felt like we had ascended to heaven that night, and the ladies were thoroughly satisfied with the special time we spent together. Occasionally, I meet up with Sophia and Emily separately. Each has her own unique charm, which I really appreciate.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm a 36-year-old man, and I feel like my world is crashing down. I love my wife, Gabby, who's 32, but I'm terrified she might be doing something behind my back. The idea is too embarrassing and messed up to talk about with friends or family. What's worse is that I think one of my coworkers might have slept with her, and everything I've seen so far seems to confirm my fears. Let me explain how we got here. I met Gabby in 2014 at a mall in our city. I was in the food court, standing in line, when I saw her. Funny thing is, I was actually heading to another restaurant, but the line was too long, so I switched. That's when I noticed her, standing near the front, looking absolutely stunning. She caught me staring, laughed, and said she wasn't in line for food. Gabby explained that she was waiting for her cousin, who worked there. Her breaking the ice saved me because I was at a loss for words. We hit it off as we chatted, and I tried to be as funny and charming as possible. When I offered to buy her something while she waited, she asked for a strawberry lemonade. After getting it for her, we continued talking until her cousin came out. Before she left, I mustered the courage to ask for her number, and she gave it to me. That was the start of everything. I did everything I could to win her over. We went on dates, attended events, and even hung out with our friends as a group. By 2017, we were married. Together, we've built a life with 3 amazing kids, 2 daughters and a son. Our journey hasn't been easy, but we've made it work, cutting back on nights out at clubs and concerts while still finding time for occasional fun. Gabby has always been an amazing partner and mother, and I've felt incredibly lucky to have her. Gabby is Cuban, stunningly gorgeous, and has always stood out. My friends used to tease me, saying I'd scored big time. She looks like a mix between Gal Gadot and Salma Hayek, with a curvy figure, tattoos on her arms, and her signature ponytail that she always wears in selfies. Professionally, Gabby works alongside her sister as an interior decorator, and together they do really well for themselves. Meanwhile, I work as a maintenance man, a job I've loved for the past 7 years. Things took a dark turn last Wednesday. There's a guy at work, Daryl, who works in the shipping area. We're not exactly friends, but we're acquaintances and often chat during lunch, usually about basketball. The most time we've spent together outside of work was playing dice in the parking lot a while back. One weekend, my car had brake problems, so Gabby had to drive me to work and pick me up afterward. The first time she came to pick me up, she accidentally arrived 30 minutes early and had to wait in the parking lot. That's when things started to feel off. When I came out of work that first day, I saw my wife, Gabby, laughing and talking with Daryl and another coworker, a woman from the office I'll call Brianna. After introducing her as my wife, we had some small talk before heading home. Looking back, I think that's where everything might have started. That week, when Gabby came to pick me up from work, I noticed she began spending time with Daryl and Brianna. I'd sometimes see them in the office, hanging out and listening to rap music on Daryl's Beats headphones, which were connected to his phone. Gabby told me she liked talking to Brianna and enjoyed hanging out with her. Since Brianna and Daryl lived close to each other and were good friends, I didn't think much of it at the time. Gabby visiting the office to talk to Brianna, and occasionally Daryl, seemed harmless. Gabby gets a lot of attention, especially on Instagram, so I've always tried to keep my insecurities in check. Even when I saw her talking to Daryl without Brianna around, I convinced myself not to jump to conclusions. If I brought up my suspicions, it would only upset Gabby, and we'd end up arguing in Spanish every day. But last Wednesday, everything changed, and my fears about Gabby possibly cheating on me hit me like a ton of bricks. That day, as I was leaving work, I said goodbye to a friend who was on the phone. He responded, and then told the person on the other end that it was me. His tone made me curious because it sounded like the person on the phone knew me. I asked who he was talking to, and he smiled, saying it was an old coworker of ours. Handing me the phone, he said the person wanted to say hi. It turned out to be Tyrell, an old coworker who'd left a while back. We caught up, and he explained he'd moved to Atlanta to work with his brother in a warehouse. He even joked about how he was making more money now. After chatting, he asked me to send him my phone number on Facebook so we could talk later. I agreed, sent him my number, and handed the phone back to my friend. Before I even made it to my car, Tyrell called me. I picked up, and he immediately asked if I was driving. When I said no, he told me not to start yet because he had something important to tell me. His tone was strange, and it made me nervous. I asked what he meant, and he insisted I couldn't tell anyone what he was about to say. Hesitantly, I agreed. He started asking me if Gabby still came to my job and if Daryl was still talking to her. His questions sent a wave of anxiety through me. I told him yes to both, and he dropped the bombshell. I think Daryl banged your wife. Hearing those words sent chills down my spine. I asked Tyrell how he knew this, and he explained that back when he worked with us, he often saw Gabby and Daryl talking. According to him, Daryl would brag to other coworkers about how badly he wanted to sleep with Gabby. Tyrell claimed Daryl frequently made comments about her figure, especially about her butt. I asked Tyrell when he had seen Gabby and Daryl together, and he said it was usually about an hour before lunch. He mentioned that while Gabby sometimes talked to Brianna, he noticed her talking to Daryl more frequently. Tyrell explained that, initially, it seemed like harmless flirting, but things started to feel off when Gabby began visiting the office on Saturdays when Daryl's department was working overtime. This shocked me because I rarely worked overtime, so I couldn't understand why she would be there. I asked Tyrell if he was sure about this, and he insisted he was. He said that during one of her Saturday visits, Daryl's department had a lot of downtime, and Daryl would play music through his Beat speaker. Tyrell said that at some point, he heard loud Spanish music and noticed things getting inappropriate between Gabby and Daryl. Tyrell described seeing Daryl grab Gabby by the neck while she twerked for him. He said she seemed to be enjoying herself, laughing and putting on a show as if she were in some kind of contest. Tyrell added that Daryl even lifted Gabby's shirt to reveal her leggings. When I asked if Gabby tried to stop him, Tyrell said no. She just kept laughing and dancing. Tyrell emphasized that everyone in the room saw it happen. Hearing this, I felt frozen. I asked Tyrell again if he was absolutely sure, and he firmly confirmed it, saying he wasn't blind. He advised me to keep Gabby away from Daryl and Brianna altogether. I thanked him for telling me but hung up feeling humiliated. My thoughts raced as I drove home, consumed with rage and sadness. What Tyrell described happened 7 or 8 months ago, and the thought of what might have happened since then was unbearable. Had she taken things further with Daryl? When I got home, Gabby was on the phone with her mom. After some small talk, I asked her if she had seen Brianna that day, and she said yes. I followed up by asking if she had seen Daryl, too, but she said no. Her answer surprised me because, from what I'd seen, they acted like the Three Musketeers. Gabby brushed it off, saying Daryl wasn't around much, and claimed it was mostly just her and Brianna, which I knew wasn't true. Then, without another word, she walked past me into the kitchen and started texting on her phone. Her response left me feeling deeply hurt. It was obvious to me she was lying about her relationship with Daryl. I stood there, watching her prepare dinner for our kids, overwhelmed by sadness, anger, and frustration. Right now, I'm stuck. I feel a mix of rage and heartbreak, unsure of what to do. I need proof of what's really going on, but gathering it is going to be difficult since it involves people at my workplace. I can't risk my job, and Tyrell's account of the twerking incident, while troubling, isn't solid enough for legal action or divorce. Gabby could easily explain it away, and Daryl would just deny everything. I'm assuming the worst, that Gabby cheated on me, but I need evidence to confirm it. Without proof, I risk losing everything in a divorce, and her family will undoubtedly come after me. I have to tread carefully, but I'm determined to find out the truth. Things have taken a turn for the worse, and I'm increasingly convinced that my coworker may have had an affair with my wife, Gabby. To provide some background, my car needed brake repairs, so Gabby had been picking me up from work. During these visits, she befriended Brianna, who works in the front office, and Daryl, a coworker from the shipping department. Over time, Gabby began visiting my workplace on her days off to hang out with them during lunch. A couple of weeks ago, I got a devastating call from an old coworker, Tyrell. He told me that Daryl might have gotten too close to Gabby. Tyrell said he'd noticed them talking privately, and it looked like they were flirting. This often happened just before Daryl's lunch break, which Tyrell found suspicious. He also mentioned that on Saturdays, when Daryl worked overtime, Gabby would come by, which raised even more red flags. Tyrell said he initially didn't want to tell me anything, but one Saturday, he witnessed something that made him reconsider. He explained that he heard Spanish music playing in the shipping dock and decided to check it out. That's when he saw Gabby twerking for Daryl. According to Tyrell, things quickly got more physical. Daryl grabbed her by the neck and lifted her shirt to expose her butt. Tyrell said it started as playful, but the way they looked at each other showed it was becoming something more serious. I tried to deny it at first, asking Tyrell if he was sure it was Gabby. He confirmed it, pointing out her distinct tattoos and hairstyle. I was stunned and humiliated. What hurt even more was that this incident happened 8 or 9 months ago. Who knows what's been going on since then? While I appreciate Tyrell finally telling me, I can't help but feel it's too late. If he'd told me sooner, I might have been able to address this before things escalated. When I got home, I asked Gabby about her relationship with Daryl. She downplayed it, saying she only occasionally talked to him and mostly hung out with Brianna. I knew she was lying, especially after everything Tyrell told me, and it became clear she was using Brianna as a cover to see Daryl. Since that conversation, I've started paying more attention to Gabby's behavior. She's always on her phone, which has a passcode I can't figure out. Late at night, she goes out on the back porch to take calls, and I've started eavesdropping. The snippets of conversation I've overheard make it seem like she's talking to Daryl. She said things like, "Stop, you're crazy," or mention fun they had at a club. Once, I even heard her say, "I can't go over there," which made me think she was referring to his house. When I confronted her about who she was talking to, she claimed it was her sister or Brianna, but her giggling and whispering told a different story. Since Tyrell's call, the red flags have been glaringly obvious. Gabby barely talks to me anymore, always claims to be busy, and has refused to be intimate. When I tried to initiate, she laughed it off, saying she didn't want it with the kids in the house. The last straw came last Saturday. After work, Gabby called to tell me she had plans to go out again and that I'd need to cook dinner for the kids. It felt like she was angry at me for unknowingly disrupting her plans, likely involving Daryl. Looking back, I can't believe I ever thought this was normal. All the signs are pointing to infidelity, but I need undeniable proof before taking any action. This is eating me alive, and I don't know how much longer I can endure this situation. When I saw Gabby all dressed up and heading out, I immediately suspected she was planning to meet Daryl. I lied, telling her I had errands to run before coming home, even though I knew she was already getting ready to leave. I told her to ask her sister to watch the kids, knowing full well that wasn't an option. She tried to guilt me into staying home so she could go out, but I stood my ground, saying I had the right to go out and do things too and might not be back for a while. Frustrated, she snapped, "Whatever," and hung up on me. Later that night, Gabby was clearly irritated. When I said just a couple of words to her, she blew up, accusing me of ruining her plans. I told her I didn't care and that my errands were more important than her hanging out. She countered, saying I never mentioned errands, to which I pointed out she hadn't told me anything about her plans either. When I asked who she was planning to meet, she just brushed me off, saying to forget it. Later that evening, I noticed Gabby on the porch, talking on her phone. Judging by her irritated tone, I assumed she was complaining about me. A few days later, things escalated. After I got home from work one night, Gabby had cooked dinner and came into the bedroom to tell me it was ready. As I entered the dining room, I saw her all dressed up again, clearly preparing to leave. When I asked where she was going, she vaguely said she was going out with friends and told me I had to watch the kids. I pressed her for specifics, but she accused me of trying to control her before storming out with an attitude. That night, Gabby didn't come back until 2:30 a.m. I was furious. I had been texting her, but the only response I got was, "Please stop texting me." When she finally came in, I was playing on our son's PlayStation, still stewing over her behavior. When I confronted her, asking why she was so late, she dismissed me, saying she was out with friends. I wasn't buying it. I told her it was disrespectful to come home so late, especially without a valid explanation. She snapped back, accusing me of being controlling, and said I never had an issue with her staying out late before. Our argument got loud enough that our son came out, worried about what was going on. Gabby used that as an excuse to end the argument and stormed into the bedroom. I let our son play the game for a little while before sending him back to bed, but I couldn't let the issue rest. After calming down, I went to the bedroom to continue the conversation. When I walked in, I stopped mid-sentence. Gabby was getting undressed, and I couldn't help but notice she was wearing a black string as underwear, something she never wore for me. It felt like a slap in the face. She froze when she saw me, her expression shifting between surprise and defiance, as if daring me to ask her about it. Without a word, she grabbed her pajamas off the bed and went into the bathroom to change, leaving me standing there, feeling humiliated and betrayed. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It stopped me in my tracks and left me crushed. I decided I'd be sleeping on the couch because things would be way too awkward after that. My mind was racing, unable to process what I'd just witnessed. Gabby had never worn anything like that before, practically her bare bottom with just a black string. To be fair, she does own sexy underwear, but it's been ages since she wore them. When we go on vacation, she likes wearing bikinis to post on Instagram, but even those weren't as revealing as what I saw. The string she was wearing was more like something you'd see on World Star. At this point, Her behavior was screaming suspicious and secretive. After reading advice online, I decided to act. I ordered a voice-activated recorder and planned to place it in her car. To avoid her seeing the package and asking questions, I had it delivered to a friend's address. Thankfully, he agreed without hesitation. Once it arrives, I'll pick it up and get to the bottom of all this. I'm ready to blow this thing wide open, no matter the cost. Thanks to Tyrell, my suspicions are now centered on the money. Today, my wife forced my hand. For context, Gabby broke her vows, and here's how it all started. Last year, my car broke down, and Gabby had to pick me up from work. While waiting, she became friends with two coworkers, Brianna, who works in the office, and Daryl. They'd chat and listen to rap music while waiting for my shift to end. Even after my car was fixed, Gabby started coming by on her lunch breaks when she wasn't working with her sister. Recently, an old friend and former coworker, Tyrell, called me with shocking news. He told me that Gabby and Daryl had been meeting up secretly and acting inappropriately. He said Gabby would visit Daryl on Saturdays when they worked overtime. Tyrell described how he once saw her twerking for Daryl in the back while music played. Daryl even lifted her shirt to see her butt and grabbed her by the neck. Tyrell suspected they might have gone further than that. Thanks to Gabby's tattoos, her usual ponytail, and the fact that she's Spanish, Tyrell had no trouble identifying her. He also mentioned she would bring Daryl lunch and hang out with him during downtime on Saturdays. Since I never work overtime, I had no idea this was happening. When I confronted Gabby about her friendship with Daryl, she outright lied, claiming they weren't close. This infuriated me because it was a blatant lie. Everyone at work saw them hanging out during lunch. After that, I started snooping to see what I could uncover, and the red flags were everywhere. Gabby would stay out all night, claiming she was with friends. She'd talk on the phone on the back porch, giggling and saying things like, "You're crazy," or "I can't come over tonight." She'd also leave the house suddenly without saying where she was going. Everything pointed to something being seriously wrong, and I knew I had to find out the truth. When I asked Gabby who she was talking to on the phone, she would usually say it was her sister or Brianna. Being at work had started feeling awkward too, especially after Tyrell's call, because I realized how nice everyone was to me, while they knew more than I did. Tyrell's information was like a master key, opening my eyes to what was happening behind my back. Gabby and Daryl had no idea that I knew about them. My only regret was that this information was 8 months old, and so much had likely happened since then. I had been so focused on work and raising our kids that I failed to notice the changes in Gabby. Tyrell showed me how blind I'd been, wearing rose-tinted glasses while Gabby used her friendship with Brianna as a front to see Daryl. Over the last 8 months, Gabby had become much more secretive. She barely talked to me, only speaking when absolutely necessary, and most of her conversations were with her friends. She started dressing up more often, and after staying out until 2 in the morning one night, I noticed she was wearing a black string thong. It concerned me because she never wore underwear like that. She usually reserved sexy bikinis for Instagram posts during vacations, but this was something different. This was meant for someone else. Seeing her like that froze me in my tracks. I couldn't even argue. I just walked out of the room. Tyrell's revelations had turned my world upside down, and the writing was clearly on the wall. Before his call, I had always tried not to be the jealous type. Gabby is beautiful, and she gets plenty of attention on Instagram. Her photos, even old ones, get likes and comments, many of which are inappropriate. It wasn't easy being a husband to someone with thousands of guys following her online, but I always try to be understanding. I thought once we got married, this sort of thing would change. I decided to buy a voice-activated recorder to get proof of what was going on. If my suspicions were true, I was prepared to divorce her. After I got the recorder, I thought I'd try to talk to Gabby to see if we could fix things. I rode with her to the supermarket to bring up the issue. I told her that while going out with friends was fine, she still had responsibilities as a parent. She accused me of being controlling and said she had the right to have fun and not spend all her time at home or working. I told her I understood she wanted to have fun, but that her sudden outings without explanation were concerning. Surprisingly, Gabby agreed to be more mindful of her responsibilities and my feelings. For a while, it seemed like we were making progress, and I thought we could work on our marriage. But a couple of days later, Daryl called her, and everything unraveled again. Earlier this week, Gabby told me the kids wanted to watch a Pixar movie with their older cousins on Saturday. She said she planned to take them to watch the movie together. I thought it was a great idea and was happy she was spending more time with the kids. However, a couple of hours after they left, my nephew called me. He mentioned he'd heard we had a particular video game he wanted to play and asked if he could come over after the movie. I told him it was fine if Gabby was willing to bring him back home. What he said next completely threw me off. He told me Gabby had dropped them off at the movie and wasn't staying to watch it with them. I was confused because Gabby had specifically told me she'd watch the movie with the kids. That's when I remembered. It was Saturday, the same day Tyrell said Gabby would meet Daryl during overtime. It was all making sense, and her lie confirmed my suspicions. Noticing the time, I realized that if anyone was working overtime on a Saturday, they'd still be there. I called my wife, Gabby, but she didn't pick up, which infuriated me. Determined to get answers, I called my job and asked for security. When I spoke to the lady there, she confirmed that the guys were still working. I hung up, now seething with anger, wondering if Gabby was actually with Daryl. I got into my car and drove to my workplace, furious and determined to get to the truth. On the way, all I could think about was the betrayal and how ridiculous this situation had become. I'd already spoken to Gabby about this before, thinking she understood how serious I was. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. If Daryl was sleeping with my wife, I was done. When I arrived at the parking lot, I immediately spotted Gabby's car. My anger intensified. I stormed into the building and headed straight for the shipping dock where Daryl worked. As I entered, his crew jumped up, clearly surprised to see me. They looked like they were about to leave, but my presence halted them. I scanned the area and didn't see Daryl or Gabby, which meant they were likely in the trucker's lounge. I made my way to the lounge, but one of the crew members tried to stop me, saying I didn't belong there. I warned him to back off or face the consequences, and it was clear he didn't want to challenge me. Not wasting more time, I pushed past and headed to the lounge. The trucker's lounge was a small, mostly unused room with broken vending machines. I knew I'd find them there, and as I got closer, I heard Daryl groaning. My suspicions were confirmed. Hugging the wall, I peered inside and couldn't believe what I saw. Daryl was sitting on a couch, his shirt open, pants and underwear down, while Gabby was on her knees in front of him. She was servicing him, completely engrossed. Daryl looked down at her like he owned her. It was a disgusting scene, one I never imagined I'd witness. I pulled out my phone, knowing I'd need proof. My hands shook as I recorded at least 7 seconds of their betrayal. Then, I burst into the room, screaming, "Screw you, bitch." Daryl looked stunned, but Gabby's reaction shocked me more. She didn't even seem embarrassed. Instead, she looked annoyed, as if I was inconveniencing her. Still holding Daryl, she glared at me and snapped, "What are you doing here?" Her casual attitude infuriated me. I yelled, "Screw you, bitch. This is how you treat me." Gabby sighed, covering her face, muttering, "Oh my God." She wasn't ashamed of what she was doing, just embarrassed about my reaction. I called her every name I could think of, my rage boiling over, but all she did was roll her eyes and say, "Can you please just leave?" Her indifference, as if our marriage didn't matter, cut deeper than anything. She didn't care that she'd been caught, didn't care that she was destroying our family. All she wanted was for me to leave, so she could continue whatever it was with Daryl. Her complete disregard for me, for our marriage, left me stunned and even angrier. I couldn't believe this was the woman I married, the mother of my children. All I could do was yell, "How could you do this to me?" After claiming she loved me, Gabby finally blurted out, "I don't love you like that, okay?" Hearing those words almost knocked the wind out of me. She told me again, in a frustrated tone, to just leave. I told her I wanted a divorce, and her only response was a flat, "Okay." That was it. No apology, no regret, just indifference. I left the warehouse, got in my car, and drove home, absolutely furious. Once I got home, I couldn't contain my rage. I punched the walls and cursed at the top of my lungs. How could she do this to me? How could the woman I thought I knew become someone so unrecognizable? I realized I was completely done with the toxic situation she had dragged me into. As of now, she still hasn't come back, and I assume she's staying with her sister. She'll have to explain the situation to her family, but at this point, I don't care. Whatever comes next, I have undeniable evidence of her infidelity, and I plan to use it to my advantage during the divorce. It's clear now that Gabby was never in love with me. She loved the lifestyle and the things I did for her. Looking back, the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Gabby didn't want a real partnership. She wanted to be desired, and when Daryl came along, showing her that attention, she betrayed everything we had. Relationships like that never last, because people like Gabby eventually reveal who they really are. To prepare myself for what was ahead, I bought a voice-activated recorder, though I only needed to use it once. That's all it took to confirm what Tyrell had warned me about. All I had to do was wait for the right opportunity to uncover the truth. That opportunity came last Saturday when Gabby claimed she was going to watch a Pixar movie with our kids and their older cousins. Initially, I believed her, but then my nephew, who was at the movies, called to let me know that Gabby planned to pick them up afterward. That caught me off guard because she had specifically said she would be watching the movie with them. After hanging up, it didn't take long to piece things together. Tyrell had previously mentioned that Gabby often visited Daryl at work during overtime shifts, the same shifts where she had been seen twerking for him months ago. Deciding to confirm my suspicions, I drove to her workplace. When I arrived, her car was in the parking lot, confirming my fears. I headed into the building, making my way toward the small trucker's lounge where I suspected they might be. Peeking inside, I saw Gabby on all fours, with Daryl holding her head in his lap. It was a painful and infuriating moment, but I knew I needed evidence. I took out my phone, recorded about 7 seconds of the scene, and then stormed in to confront them. I unleashed a level of anger I didn't know I was capable of. It hurt even more when Gabby seemed more annoyed than remorseful about being caught. Daryl looked shocked, but Gabby had the nerve to ask me to leave. That sent me over the edge. I demanded to know how she could do something like this, and she coldly responded, "I don't love you like that," before telling me to leave again. Hearing that almost made me faint. I left in a haze of rage and heartbreak, driving back home while trying to process everything. After venting my anger at the situation, I eventually calmed down and faced the harsh truth. Our marriage was over. Gabby didn't love me, not as a partner or a husband. Looking back, I realized who Gabby really was. She wanted to feel entitled in the relationship, and I unknowingly enabled that by trying to keep her happy at any cost. She had convinced me that being a good husband meant catering to her every need. I thought I was lucky to have her because she presented herself as a trophy wife, always seeking attention and validation from others. Her obsession with social media only made things worse. With countless followers, mostly men, and flirtatious comments on her posts, I had to develop thick skin just to cope. Whether it was bikini pictures from our trips to Vegas or Jamaica or her everyday selfies, she craved attention. It didn't matter that I was devoted to her. She would always chase the next source of validation. Now that it's over, I've accepted the reality of who she is and that our marriage was doomed from the start. I knew it was time to tell my family everything. The first person I called was my older brother, Ricky. When he answered, I let it all out, ranting about what had happened, laced with as many curse words as I could remember. After I told my brother I was at home, he said he had to run a quick errand but would stop by afterward. I then called my younger sister to break the news to her. She gave me a lecture, but she also mentioned that Ricky had called her and was already aware of the situation. She said she would check on me later and hung up. Not long after, she called back to tell me that Ricky was coming to pick me up and suggested I go with him. She asked where the kids were, and I told her they were at the movies with Gabby, supposed to pick them up afterward. She wasn't thrilled about the kids being with her, but in my state of mind, I figured there wasn't much we could do at that moment. After hanging up, I started to drift off to sleep, only to hear Ricky's car pull up. When I opened the door, I saw Ricky walking toward me, carrying a bag in his toolbox. Ricky's presence was always intimidating. He had played football in high school and college, and with his bald head and beard, he looked like he came straight from the military. He walked up to me, gave me a big hug, and even though we always played it tough with our feelings, I couldn't help but tear up. We both knew this was what I needed. After the hug, he told me he stopped at the store and bought new locks for the house. He said the last thing I needed was to leave and have Gabby come back to take everything. After about an hour of talking and changing the locks, we headed to Ricky's house. He and his girlfriend did everything they could to cheer me up over the weekend. My sister Gina also came over to offer support. Even with my family's encouragement, I couldn't shake the images of what I had witnessed. I kept hoping Gabby would confess, but after what I saw, I couldn't stop thinking about revenge. Payback was burning inside me, and I wasn't finished with this yet. Then, on Sunday, Gabby's sister, Christina, called me. At first, Ricky didn't want me to answer, but I reminded him that my kids were with her, so I took the call. Christina asked what was going on, saying Gabby wouldn't come back to the house but wouldn't say why. I told her the truth. I had caught Gabby cheating at my job. There was a moment of silence before she started denying it, claiming I was lying about her sister. After letting her rant for a bit, I told her to hang up and that I would send her the proof. She tried to say something, but I angrily ended the call. I immediately sent her the video and didn't hear from her the rest of the day. The next day, Monday, I went to work and spoke with my supervisor about Daryl and Gabby. To my surprise, he gave me a testimony form to file a formal complaint. While I was filling it out, he expressed his sympathy and asked if I was sure about what was happening. I angrily replied that I was sure and even asked if he wanted to see the video I had. He was taken aback and asked if I truly had evidence. When I confirmed that I did, he took the form back from me, saying it wasn't needed anymore. He then picked up the phone and called someone to report the situation. After hanging up, he told me that he had contacted the manager and asked me to send the video to his email so he could handle it from there. When the boss was scheduled to visit the facility in a couple of days, I told him I wouldn't be coming into work during that time, and he said he was just about to suggest that anyway. Then, Gabby's sister Christina finally called me back, and I was surprised when she said she had spoken with Gabby. Christina wanted me to talk to Gabby that night because the kids wanted to come home. I told her I'd take the kids, but I didn't want to talk to Gabby because there was nothing left to say. Christina said she knew Gabby had messed up, but insisted that I should be the reasonable one and think about the family. I felt like I was being unreasonable, but I stuck to my stance. I told Christina I wasn't going to talk to Gabby because she had cheated with my coworker and embarrassed me at work. I also mentioned that Gabby had brought another man into my house, and I was supposed to just forget everything that happened. Christina argued that it wasn't true, and that Gabby only messed around with him at the job or his place. I scoffed and said, "How do I know that? For all I know, she could have slept with Daryl's crew too when she was there." Christina got mad and denied that, and I demanded to know what really happened. That's when Christina told me everything Gabby had confided in her, and honestly, I regretted asking because I knew Gabby wouldn't lie to Christina, which made it even worse. According to Christina, when Gabby first met Brianna, Daryl was talking to her, and Gabby told him she was there to pick me up. While they waited, Daryl and Brianna started talking, and whenever Gabby came in, they'd hang out while waiting for me to come out. Over time, Gabby and Brianna became friends, and Gabby liked spending time with them during lunch. Christina said that after a while, Daryl began complimenting Gabby, especially about her body, which surprised her, but she liked the attention. One day, she messed up and told Brianna she found Daryl attractive, and Brianna ended up telling him what Gabby had said. From then on, Daryl got too close and started making inappropriate comments. Gabby played it off, but she admitted to Christina that she liked the attention and kept thinking about it. I scoffed again, asking why Gabby didn't just tell me about it so I could put a stop to it. Christina said she didn't want it because she really liked Daryl and how wild he was acting. I asked her when all of this started, and Christina hesitated at first, but when I threatened to hang up, she told me. She said Gabby told her about a birthday party Brianna's sister was having. I knew about Brianna's sister and how she always found excuses to get drunk. Gabby went to the party with Brianna, and according to Christina, Daryl was there too. Gabby was surprised to see him, but they ended up hanging out and having fun. Christina asked Gabby if Daryl was trying to get with her, and Gabby confirmed that he was. She said Daryl started dancing with her, but eventually, things became more aggressive between them. When I asked what she meant by aggressive, Christina said Daryl had asked Gabby to twerk for him. Christina said Gabby turned around and started twerking on Daryl. She mentioned that in the tight leggings Gabby was wearing, it was obvious Daryl was enjoying the way she was grinding on him. After a while, Daryl started kissing her, and they ended up making out. Christina said that after that, they would go out together, and things started to escalate. When I asked what she meant by escalating, the red flags really began to add up. Christina explained that when Gabby went to hang out at Daryl's apartment with Brianna, Daryl couldn't keep his hands off her, and Gabby allowed it. Brianna, seeing what was happening, left them alone in the apartment. Christina said that after they made out, Daryl went down on Gabby. After that, he kept trying to do the same thing, and sometimes Gabby would stop him, but eventually, she didn't. Christina said that at one point, Gabby started returning the favor. I asked Christina if Gabby did that while my kids were around, and she assured me it all happened either at the job or at Daryl's apartment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and Christina expressed her disbelief too. She said that Gabby admitted Daryl knew exactly what to do and that she loved how wild he was. Gabby thought going down on her would be the extent of it, but Daryl wanted more. Christina said that one day, Daryl turned her around and pinned her against the couch. She told Gabby she should have run at that point, but Gabby couldn't bring herself to do it. She allowed the situation to go further, and Daryl took her from behind. I was stunned, and I had to ask how Gabby could do this to me. Christina said Gabby found the whole situation exciting, and the fact that it was wrong made it even more thrilling. She also said Gabby liked how rebellious Daryl was, and when he finally got her, he didn't disappoint. Christina mentioned that Daryl was so eager that Gabby thought the neighbors might have heard them. I could relate to that because when my brother and I helped our aunt move out of her apartment, we heard what sounded like explosions and machine gun fire coming from the apartment below us. We later realized someone was watching an action movie, and the walls were so thin it was like we were living in an action film. If Daryl's apartment was anything like that, I could easily imagine the neighbors hearing everything if Daryl was being as aggressive as Christina described. Christina said that from then on, whenever Daryl wanted it, he got it until Tyrell found out. It was supposed to be their secret, but Tyrell turned out to be more of a man than they thought. Christina was about to continue, but I told her that the party and apartment situation was enough. She asked if I was going to be the reasonable one again and talk to Gabby, but I told her no. I said I was going to come over the next day to get the kids, but I had nothing to say to Gabby. Christina insisted that if we both acted stubborn, it wouldn't work, but I told her Gabby made a fool of me, and I would never give her that chance again. I told Christina when I'd be coming to pick up the kids, and she groaned before hanging up in frustration. I felt pretty low after that, and it took me a while to regain my composure. A few hours later, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize, followed by a text. It turned out to be a coworker I knew, and I was surprised to hear from him. I was driving at the time, so I answered via Bluetooth. He asked what was going on, and I told him I was just running errands. He then asked if I had anything to do with Daryl getting fired, which took me completely by surprise. He explained that 2 men and a woman in suits had arrived with her supervisor, and they went straight to the back where the trucker's lounge was. From this, I figured they must have been checking the lounge for video footage. About 20 minutes later, Daryl was called to the office and told to pack up his things. I admitted to my involvement, and he said he would have done the same thing. He asked when I was coming back, and I told him I'd work a half day on Friday. He said okay, and we ended the call. I was relieved and decided to treat myself to a nice dinner that night. The next day was when I had to pick up the kids, and I dreaded it. It had been days since I'd seen Gabby, and my brother Ricky came with me for support. When I got there, the kids were excited to see me and immediately told me their mother had been mean to them and ignoring them, so they were ready to come home. I saw Gabby in the kitchen, talking on her phone and completely ignoring me. I told the kids to go ahead and get in the car, and my oldest daughter asked if she could bring her iPad with her. Gabby snapped and said no, insisting it had to stay with her. I told her it was fine and I'd take responsibility for it, but Gabby refused. She said she bought it, so it stayed with her until they came back. My daughter was getting upset, so I told her to wait in the car. As she walked out, I couldn't believe Gabby was being so petty. That's when a huge argument broke out. I didn't hold back this time. I called her a hoe, and she shot back, calling me a snitch for getting Daryl fired. She said she didn't know Daryl like that, and I told her she could have said no. She responded with a screw you, go cry to my mama, and said I was lucky she didn't look my way. She told me I should have fought Daryl instead of getting him fired. I said that real women don't get that luxury, and I wasn't going to fight over a thoughtless woman. Then, she called me dusty and lame, saying she didn't love a lame guy. I got so angry I grabbed a glass of orange juice and threw it at her. She barely dodged it, looking at me in shock, and then threw a fork at my head, though she missed. The fight escalated until my brother, Christina, and Christina's friend intervened. Gabby yelled that she didn't need me and kept shouting next. My brother practically had to pick me up and pull me onto the porch to calm me down. After I cooled off, I left because I was exhausted and didn't have the energy to fight anymore. Once I got back in the car, I told my daughter that her mother had taken the iPad, but she didn't care anymore. She just wanted to leave. I couldn't believe everything I had just gone through. Even though I had overreacted, it felt good to finally curse Gabby out. Right now, my kids are with me, and with the new locks on the door, it's going to stay that way. I had to break the news to the kids in a way they could understand that their mother and I won't be living together anymore. They were crushed but understood. As I've said before, the only thing on my mind now is the divorce and getting the lawyers involved. The video could play a big role in helping with the arguments, and I'm hoping it will make a difference. My wife is clearly full of herself, and if she thinks she's going to have some meaningful relationship with Daryl, she's delusional. Daryl, or anyone else for that matter, won't stick around for her. She's approaching 40, with kids, and Daryl isn't interested in being the world's greatest stepdad, despite what she might think. I know Daryl better than she does. He's just using her for a fling. Once he's done, he'll move on to the next one, and that reality will hit her sooner than she thinks. I bet it won't even take a year. At least now I have some peace of mind, but I still have to worry about my kids and my real family. Maybe even Christina, if she ever sees through Gabby's nonsense. After everything that happened, it feels like I've finally gotten my life back on track. The divorce is finalized, and though it was a rough road, I can finally breathe again. My kids are with me now, and we've created a new rhythm to our lives, one that's filled with laughter, love, and peace. The house feels like a home again, and I no longer feel that constant weight of uncertainty hanging over me. It was hard breaking the news to my kids, but they understood. They were crushed at first, but I could see in their eyes that they trusted me. and that meant everything. They needed stability, and I promised to be the father they deserved. That became my focus, just being there for them, showing them that no matter what happened with Gabby or anyone else, I'd always be their rock. It took time, but I've started to find myself again. The pain of betrayal has lessened, and in its place, a stronger version of me has emerged. I've surrounded myself with real people. Ricky, my brother, who's been by my side through it all, and even Christina, who had the courage to distance herself from Gabby. She's apologized, and though I didn't expect that, it showed me that not everyone I cared about was lost in the mess. I can't lie, there were days when I wondered if I'd ever find peace. But now, as I watch my kids play in the yard, hear them laughing over dinner, or see them excited about the smallest things, I know I made the right choice. Life might not have gone the way I planned, but it's turned into something better. I've also realized that I'm ready to let love in again. But this time, it's different. I'm not rushing anything, and I'm not settling for less than I deserve. I met someone recently. She's kind, patient, and just gets me. We enjoy simple moments together, whether it's a quiet evening at home or a walk through the park. It feels right, and I'm not in a rush. She doesn't bring drama into my life. She just brings peace, and I can feel my heart slowly opening up to that. I know I've been through a lot, and I'm not naive enough to think it's all smooth sailing from here. But what I've learned is that I'm stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. The past doesn't define me, it's just a part of my story. And right now, I'm writing the next chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of better days ahead. I've found peace, not only in my home but in myself. And with my kids by my side, I know that the best is yet to come. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
At around 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, Beverly entered through the front door, tossed her purse and keys onto the nightstand, and made her way down the hallway to the master bedroom. I'm unsure if she noticed me sitting in the office, but it didn't really matter. Over the past few years, I've practically become invisible to her. Approaching her, I retrieved her set of keys, took my spare keys from her, and then rummaged through her purse. I removed her cell phone and wallet, extracting all the cash and credit cards from my wallet and stashing the loot in my pocket, just to be safe. I also grabbed her driver's license before returning to my spot in the office. 15 minutes later, Bev emerged from the hall, looking well-dressed, and spotted me. As she slung her purse over her shoulder and grabbed her keys, she remarked, "I'm meeting some girls from work. Don't wait up." "No, you're not going out with girls from work," I protested. "Jack, you should know by now. You don't control me. I'll do as I please," she retorted. "I didn't say you couldn't hang out with girls from work. I said you're not going to. You're going to see your boyfriend, so don't lie to me," I stated. Beverly stood silently for a moment before boldly entering the office and confronting me. "All right, Jack, you know I'd prefer to handle this differently, but let's end it here. You have two options. Either salvage what's left of this marriage by granting me some freedom, or face divorce and be cut out of my life. What's it going to be?" she challenged. "I'll take door number 3, I replied with a smirk. "Don't be childish. There's no door number 3. Either accept that I have a lover now, a real man, or brace yourself for the consequences," Beverly warned. I stood up, walked over to Bev, and pushed her against the wall, removing the engagement ring and wedding rings from her left hand. With my face close to hers and a fierce glare in my eyes, I whispered angrily, "Here's your door number 3. It's my front door. When you leave through it, it'll be the last time you walk out with anything and never return. You won't get another penny of my money. You'll lose your husband, your daughter, your house, your money, your car, and your job eventually." "You're living in a fantasy, Jack," she muttered nervously. "My lawyer will destroy you tomorrow. I'll send the divorce papers to your workplace. If you damage me, you'll suffer more than I will." I pulled her away from the wall and dragged her toward the front door, her heels causing her to stumble as she screamed incoherently. Bev struggled to maintain her balance, her composure shattered. Throughout our marriage, I had never laid a hand on her, and she didn't know how to react. As she began to regain her senses in the front yard, I shut the door and locked it, the lock already replaced earlier in the day. Earlier, as Bev left, I made the first of 2 calls. I dialed my 19-year-old daughter's number at college. "Hey, it's Dad. Our situation with your mom has hit a crucial point. Looks like she'll be moving in with her boyfriend, and I need to talk to you about it. Just so you know, I've got our last conversation and tons of past arguments recorded. You can listen to them, so you know the truth when she tries to twist things and blame me, which she probably will. Truth is, your mom's been cheating. Not sure how many times, but she's chosen to leave us for this guy. I'll explain more soon, but her boyfriend seems pretty sketchy, so be cautious in your relationship with her. I approached Patty, asking her to return home for the weekend. My intention was to have a conversation and offer her the chance to listen to some tapes if she desired. Thankfully, Patty agreed to come home on Friday. After sorting that out, I reached out to Martha, our neighbor down the block. "Martha, it's Jack," I said over the phone. "If the offer's still good, I'd like to take you up on it. Could you come over in about an hour?" I kept my explanation brief. I felt it was necessary to confide in Martha. Bev and I had met young, married, and soon had Patty. Things seemed good at the start, but Bev's demeanor changed rapidly. She became grumpy, manipulative, and controlling. I tried my best to keep the peace and make her happy, but it only seemed to make things worse. Looking back, I realized I contributed to my own suffering by constantly trying to please her. Now in our 40s, our lives were a mess. It wasn't long before I discovered Bev's affair with a man named Sylvester, known as Sly, who had a violent past. The realization that our marriage was beyond repair brought me a sense of relief, and I began planning my next steps. "I've heard stories where the husband takes half the money," I continued, "but not me. I took every penny I could find, including all the cash in the house. I changed the locks and planned to provoke Bev as much as possible. I knew her well enough to anticipate her reactions. She's dangerous in many ways, but this time she'd be a danger to herself, too." In fact, my planning had started long before I discovered Bev's affair. For years, I had been discreetly recording our arguments. Bev thought the device I always carried with me was a simple MP3 player, but in reality, I was building a library of her outbursts to document her behavior. I knew no one would believe my stories unless I had proof, as she only mistreated me behind closed doors. I wanted to be able to share my experiences with everyone, including Patty, to reveal Bev's true nature. On the Monday following our Sunday argument, I hosted a gathering in the company break room. A prominent banner declared "Happy Divorce" overhead. With cake and ice cream at the ready, I eagerly anticipated the arrival of the process server. Fortunately, it was a pleasantly plump girl handling the task. Numerous photos were snapped as my co-workers and I celebrated the receipt of our divorce papers. I even took a picture while accepting the papers, planting a kiss on the server girl's cheek as she sported a festive hat. In another snapshot, I playfully fed her cake, both of us grinning. After the festivities, I emailed the photos to Bev, along with others from the party. Among them were shots of myself and Martha, my roommate, lounging in bed with sheets drawn up, smiling broadly. I hoped Bev would notice her wedding rings adorning Martha's left hand resting on my chest. An hour later, I received an angry call. "You scoundrel! My lawyer will tear you apart after seeing these photos. What a foolish move." "Hardly, Bev. There's nothing inappropriate in these images. No nudity, just pranks between neighbors. Just light-hearted pictures," I countered. "We'll address this later, Jack. I'll swing by the house this evening to retrieve some belongings. It might be best if you're not there. If I'm absent, you won't gain entry. All locks have been changed. If you need anything, be there well before 6:45. Martha and I have plans at 7 o'clock, and I'd rather not be late." Last night marked the most satisfying closeness I've experienced, and tonight promises to be even better. With that, I ended the call and ignored her subsequent 5 attempts. While I haven't answered all her calls since, I have listened to every message. Unlike other men in similar situations, there was a good chance Bev might slip up or accidentally reveal a secret in her angry messages. And indeed, she did divulge herself several times in the following weeks. At 4:30 that day, I drove to Bev's workplace parking lot, aiming to arrive before the evening rush. Confirming the absence of security cameras, what I had to do would be swift. Pulling up beside Bev's car, I circled around her, using wire cutters to sever the valve stems on all her tires. Oh, she'd certainly be enraged. And there'd be no fixing them in time to make it home by 6:45. However, it was around 6:35 when she appeared. Evidently, she'd been out with someone, desperate to return home. Having seen receipts for clothing she hadn't brought home, I knew she must have had plenty stashed at her lover's. She must have wanted something else. Slipping out the back door, I hurried to Martha's house, leaving Bev pounding on the front door and shouting. Upon my return that evening, I found my front window shattered, blood splattered around it. After reviewing the porch security footage, I called the police. The video depicted Bev smashing the window with a tire iron, her threats to harm me echoing clear. Unfortunately for her, the lock I'd installed required a key from both sides. As she recoiled, she sliced her forearm deeply, inciting more screams and threats. I promptly reported the incident, and an officer guided me through filing a restraining order. The next morning, Bev was served with papers forbidding her from coming within 500 feet of me or our home. To say she was livid would be an understatement. "What in the world are you doing, idiot?" kicked off her next call, filled with fury and renewed threats. I meticulously recorded the entire conversation. A few hours later, after she had calmed down a bit, she called again. This time, she mentioned sending her friend Lindsay to retrieve some of her belongings that evening. What could she be so desperate to retrieve from the house, I wondered. Suspicions brewing, I agreed to meet Lindsay at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday. To prepare, I left work a bit early to set up a video camera in my bedroom, with a monitor discreetly installed in my office. Lindsay arrived promptly, and I greeted her warmly. While she packed some clothes into 2 black plastic trash bags, I sat on the bed, observing. Lindsay looked at me nervously, and then requested water from the kitchen. I smiled and left. Upon glancing at the monitor, I noticed Lindsay pulling a shoebox from her closet and placing it into a bag nearby. She then resumed selecting clothes. Upon her return with water, I observed her continuing to pack. She declared that it should suffice, and requested me to take one bag while she took the other, noting that the one she held seemed heavier. I offered to assist Lindsay, but she declined, insisting she was fine and asking me to grab another bag. As she began to fidget and move towards the door with her package, I questioned if there was anything in the package I should be aware of. I grasped her wrist and opened the package, to which she responded anxiously, explaining that it contained clothes and items that Bev needed. Realizing her lie, I confronted Lindsay about the odor emanating from the box, and upon opening it, I found stacks of worn $50 and $100 bills. Accusing her of attempting to steal from me, I rose to my feet and escorted her towards the exit and down the hallway. Lindsay claimed that the money belonged to Bev and that she was merely sent to collect it, denying any intention of theft. However, I pointed out that she came to my house supposedly for clothes, but was leaving with a box of money, which, in my view, constituted theft. Threatening to call the police, I insisted that she prepare to be arrested for robbery. In response, Lindsay pleaded with me not to involve the authorities, citing her children and husband. I seated her on the couch and expressed my disappointment, stating that she would never be welcome in my house again. Despite her protests and tears, I made it clear that if she wished to make amends for her wrongdoing, she had only one chance. "You'll leave this house and inform Bev that I caught you stealing. Then you'll report everything you hear or see to me, especially regarding our divorce or her relationship with Sly. You won't divulge anything about our arrangement. Bev made a terrible mistake getting involved with this loser, and you'll ultimately help her leave him." I informed Lindsay that if she cooperated with me, I had the entire incident on video, and I could call the police and file a report against her at any time. Reluctantly, Lindsay agreed to act as my informant. As soon as she departed, I took the box of money and walked to Martha's house at the end of the block. She agreed to conceal it for me until I could safely stash it somewhere beyond Bev's reach. I knew the likely source of the money. Bev's Aunt Mabel, known for her stinginess, passed away a few months ago, leaving Bev as her sole heir. While I knew Aunt Mabel had left Bev a small rural cottage, there was never any mention of money. It seemed that when Bev inspected the cabin after the will reading, she stumbled upon her aunt's hidden cash. When my wife Bev called, enraged and screaming, I recorded the conversation cautiously. "This money is mine, Jack. I want my damn money," she yelled. "Bev, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I caught Lindsay trying to pilfer money from my nightstand. This is mine." "You know exactly what I'm referring to. The money in the shoebox is mine. It's from Aunt Mabel," I retorted. "Maybe Lindsay found some money in a shoebox, but if so, she likely took it and kept it for herself. I don't have it. And if you had money here unknown to me, you didn't report it on your taxes last year. I've reviewed our tax returns. You're welcome to involve the police, and then we'll inform the IRS about this money, letting them handle your tax evasion. she snapped before hanging up. I felt a need for retaliation. I'd pushed Bev's buttons too hard for her to simply disappear. Restricted by a restraining order from leaving her house, I anticipated she might retaliate against me through my car, considering I'd previously vandalized hers. Hence, I had a dashboard-mounted camera installed, but it wasn't sufficient. If she chose that route, I wanted clear footage. Thus, when I parked in front of the garage on Wednesday morning, I set up an exterior camera. Discreetly positioned, it streamed video to my desk, accessible an hour before lunch. I watched on my laptop as Bev parked behind my car, got out, and began smashing it with a hammer, shattering windows and denting panels. The sight of her breaking the windshield and yelling sent a shiver down my spine. I dialed emergency, and a police car awaited her as she left the driveway. Presenting the video evidence of my damaged Toyota, the authorities arrested Bev, recognizing her actions as a criminal offense. The resisting arrest charge was an added bonus. As she was led away, her pleading eyes met my silent stare. Bev's divorce lawyer phoned me Wednesday, notifying me of a court hearing regarding access to the money withdrawn from our joint accounts. Set for Thursday at 10 a.m., I arrived at 9:50, wondering if Bev had posted bail. She entered with her lawyer, wearing a smug expression. Addressing the judge, her lawyer asserted, "Your Honor, my client was denied access to the shared bank accounts. After she filed for divorce, her husband illicitly emptied them. We're requesting a 50-50 split. Mr. Reynolds, would you like to address the court?" "Yes, Your Honor. My wife, who has been unfaithful, has been withdrawing her own funds from our joint accounts for months. The money I withdrew was fair compensation since I cover rent and bills. She abandoned our marriage to be with her affair partner." Bev rose, objecting. "That's untrue. He drained our savings and checking accounts, leaving me with nothing." Her lawyer intervened, guiding her back to her seat for a brief conference while I presented documents to the judge. "Your Honor, these bank statements cover last year. You'll see highlighted amounts, including Bev's salary, up until a few months ago, along with periodic bonuses. Then, about 6 months ago, her deposits ceased, including bonuses. I have a recorded conversation with her HR confirming her direct deposit switch to her personal account. The total amount diverted from our joint account is significant. It's evident my unfaithful wife possesses substantial wealth obtained from our marriage." The judge scrutinized the bank statements and then addressed Beverly. "Do you have any response, Miss Reynolds?" Her lawyer rose cautiously, stating, "Your Honor, even if my client has personal funds, Mr. Reynolds is still obligated to provide her with her fair share." "Well, Counselor, I don't appreciate deceit. Miss Reynolds claimed she was destitute, yet she entered with you. It's clear she was financially supported from marital assets, deceiving her husband and the court. Since Mr. Reynolds covers expenses from his own funds, there's no reason to alter the financial arrangements. Property division will be addressed in the final divorce decree. Case closed." As I left, Bev confronted me in the hallway. I began noting her threats. "Bev, you're violating the restraining order. I'll contact the police if you don't leave. By the way, how was jail? Ready for more time there? You're facing criminal charges." Though she seemed ready to retaliate, I continued toward the exit. She stood, fists clenched, face flushed. Later that evening, I went to a different bar where I had previously encountered an intriguing man named Zeke. Fortunately, he was there. I greeted him and asked if he remembered me, to which he replied that my name wasn't important. Zeke then mentioned that he still had the beat-up car. Expressing his disdain for the car, he explained that his wife had taken the good one when she left with her new lover. He complained about the broken air conditioning and his inability to afford a replacement. I inquired about his car insurance and suggested that if he followed my advice, I might be able to help him get something better. Zeke responded by saying he was listening. "Let's imagine you're driving down 38th Street, and suddenly a gray cat dashes out in front of you. Naturally, you hit the brakes, and there's a chance the lady behind you might rear-end your lousy car at speeds over 15 miles per hour. Your car could end up totaled, but as long as you're firmly against the headrest with your seatbelt on, you should be okay. Insurance will take care of the damages. Plus, you could at least afford a car with air conditioning." "But what if the lady who hits me gets injured? I can't do that to her." "Well, I can assure you she'll be an unfaithful wife, and there won't be anyone else in her car if you follow my instructions. What do you think about that?" Oh man, that would be great. I can't stand cheaters. And I definitely need to get rid of this car. Park at the corner of 38th and Lessing by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Keep an eye out for a blue Miata leaving the parking lot and heading your way. Pull out in front of it. She doesn't like passing other cars, so drive a block or so until she's tailing you. Then, you'll spot a cat darting across the road. Get ready and hit the brakes hard. Just stay in the car. Afterward, dial emergency and mention a possible neck injury. And by the way, we've never met. I won't be back in this bar, and we don't know each other. Dude, I'm colder than the AC in your new car. On Friday, I left work early to meet my daughter at home. As planned, she finished her classes and returned on Sunday evening. We discussed the divorce situation, and I played her a recording of my conversation with her mother about door number 3. Patty was stunned by her mother's ruthless tone and demands. Then, I shared recordings from the past 2 years, revealing a side of Bev she'd never known. What do you know about the guy Mom's with? Dad? I know he's trouble, and I want you to steer clear of him. If you must meet your mom, make sure it's in a public place. I don't know what he's capable of to get to me. In any case, always have something to protect yourself if there's even a hint he might be around. Patty, I knew your mom and I had our issues, but I never realized the extent of it. What went wrong between us? This was a question I had anticipated, so I proceeded to offer a condensed version of my viewpoint to Patty. I explained to her that her mother and I had fundamentally different perspectives on marriage. After reflecting on the matter, I conveyed to Patty that I had identified 4 main ways power could be distributed in a relationship. There are instances when neither party takes the lead, resulting in a situation where everything drifts aimlessly like a ship without a rudder. Alternatively, both partners may assume responsibility, leading to constant battles over dominance, or a division of control over different aspects of the relationship. Some couples might even share responsibility equally, which was my expectation going into our relationship. However, things didn't pan out as expected. Another scenario arises when the man assumes full control. While such an arrangement may function under specific circumstances, modern perceptions often view such paternalistic relationships as oppressive to women. Yet, if a man wholeheartedly devotes himself to his wife, it can resemble a fairy tale romance, offering a fulfilling life to a wife with the right temperament, free from the burden of difficult decisions. Alternatively, it could mirror your maternal grandparents' dynamic, where your grandmother was passive and your grandfather was dominant and at times harsh. Your mother likely grew up witnessing this and expected a similar power dynamic in our relationship. Consequently, when I attempted to share equal footing with her, she perceived it as a sign of weakness on my part, leading to increasing disrespect despite my efforts to please her. This leads me to the final scenario, a relationship where the wife dominates. It seems your mom opted to take charge. When I failed to meet her standards of a good person, she turned cruel. She dictated which projects should be completed and insisted they meet her standards. Countless times, she initiated family projects only to micromanage every detail, leaving many unfinished because I couldn't tolerate feeling emasculated in my own home. She even instructed me on how to hold tools while working, making it unbearable. In such cases, when the wife dominates, it goes against human nature. I don't comprehend how this dynamic can function. While a husband may remain loving and affectionate, the wife loses respect for him as she exerts control. I believe this dynamic has manifested in our relationship. As I began to resist, Beverly perceived it as a lack of responsibility on my part. By then, she already viewed me as weak. When I refused to be bossed around, she saw me as a rebellious child. I doubt I'll ever regain her respect. This divorce may be my final opportunity to earn it back. I explained to Patty that she would understand my actions when she realized how difficult it was to assert my intolerance for her mother's lifestyle. I advised her that when making significant decisions in her future relationships, such as starting a family or choosing careers and homes, it was crucial for mutual respect to prevail. I emphasized the importance of both Patty and her partner, understanding what to expect to avoid the unhappy situation Beverly and I found ourselves in. In response, Patty assured me that she would keep my advice in mind and promised to consider it. Shortly after, the phone rang. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Memorial Hospital. Your wife was in a car accident. She's stable and not severely injured, but she'll be with us, at least for the night." Patty and I drove to the hospital, and I allowed her to enter the room first. She didn't stay long, and afterward, I requested to speak with Bev alone. When she emerged, wearing a gloomy expression, I suspected Patty had spoken harshly to her. "God, you look terrible, Bev," I remarked with a slight grin. "What a dreadful week, huh? First, you lose your marriage, husband, and home. Then you get served with a restraining order and arrested for a felony. Next, you lose some of your expected money, and now your car is totaled, and you're here in the hospital with a broken wrist and a bruised face from the airbag. Seems like this divorce is turning out much better for me." "Freak you," she retorted. "Oh, Bev, where's your old sly charm? Has he come to visit yet? Don't worry, he's probably busy with one of his other 2 women right now." Her complexion turned pale. "You probably didn't know about the others when you started all this, did you? Well, looks like you know now. I wonder how long it will be before he wants you to serve one of them. I never thought of you as a people pleaser, but that might be a good skill to learn considering how much you'll need it in prison." "I'm not going to jail. My lawyer will get these false charges dropped." "Really? You crash my car and threaten my health, and you think you'll get off easy? Because when I spoke to the DA, he made it clear he's gunning for you. He's got photographic evidence and an upcoming election to win. Now he's aiming to look like a hero cracking down on crime. I believe he'll push for the maximum penalty." She simply sat there, staring at me. "By the way, did you decide which car insurance company to contact?" I asked. "Car insurance? What are you talking about? We still have the same old." "Wait, so you didn't bother getting insurance this week when you filed for divorce? I removed your car from my insurance. You must have known about this, considering you insisted on having only your name on your Miata. If you didn't get insurance this week, you're in serious trouble. You'll face fines, towing costs, and 3 years of payments. That Miata may end up in a junkyard while you're still paying for it. And since you won't have a job after your felony conviction, you may not need another car. Plus, you'll likely have to cover the medical bills for the guy you hit, and his insurance company will demand payment for the damages. Damn it. But at least you have your own medical insurance, right?" "I'm on yours." No, I removed you from my health insurance on Monday. Didn't you take care of that too?" "Baby, you're in big trouble. The ambulance ride, ER visit, x-rays, doctor's fees, cast for your arm, hospital stay, and follow-up care will cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Hey, speaking of medicine, the other day, I was reminiscing about when you fell ill a couple of years back. Remember? I took a week off to care for you. I held your head while you were vomiting and cleaned up everything afterward. When you couldn't make it to the bathroom in time, I called the doctor and went to the pharmacy to get you medicine. Then, a week later when you felt better, you started scolding me again, insulting me, and calling me names. I wonder how well old Sly will take care of you next time you're sick. Well, it's time for me to call Sly now that you think he's done with his other woman. I wish you a good life." As I left, Beverly sat there crying, but I didn't care anymore. Everything went on as usual for some time. I kept in touch with Lindsay occasionally. She started worrying about Sly's influence over Bev, and gradually, Lindsay distanced herself from her. Then one evening, as I returned home and headed to my front door, I was attacked on the lawn. I was cautious about possible attacks, but I didn't see this one coming. A guy wearing a ski mask knocked the wind out of me, twisted my arm behind my back, and demanded I give him the box of money and tell the DA to drop the charges. I felt helpless, but still had the car alarm remote in my hand. I pressed the panic button, setting off the alarm. Sly got furious, hit me again, and then ran off quickly as the neighbor's porch lights turned on and people started looking out. I yelled for someone to call emergency, and a police officer arrived a few minutes later. I wasn't injured enough for an ambulance, and Sly was long gone. None of my neighbors could identify him, so he escaped punishment for the attack. An even bigger shock came when I told my daughter about it the next day. "Dad, I didn't want to tell you, but I also had an encounter with Sly. Mom called me to talk. I agreed, but insisted we meet away from his apartment. She asked me to pick her up, but when I arrived, she sat me down on their couch. Then Sly came out and talked to me. He said since Mom wasn't coping well with her injuries in bed, I would have to tend to his needs. He claimed she owed him, and I would have to pay for it. I looked at my mother, and she just stared at the floor without saying anything. Sly told me to make her comply. Mom looked at me and pleaded, saying, "Please, baby, stay with him. It won't be that bad, and I really need you to do this for me." He then approached me, grabbed my wrist, and tried to force me to stand up, saying we were going to the bedroom. With my right hand on the pepper spray in my purse, I sprayed it in his face when he pulled me away. He screamed, grabbed his face, and I grabbed my purse, attempting to pull my mother out the door, but she resisted and went toward him. I yelled at her to come with me, but she chose to assist him in the bathroom, so I left. I can't believe my own mom tried to set me up with that idiot. I don't know if I can ever forgive her for this. I was boiling with anger, like any father in my situation. Contemplating my Beretta in the bedroom, I almost reached for it. After a while, my daughter reassured me, confirming she wasn't damaged, and advised me to consider the future. I made Patty promise not to walk alone until after the trial, and always to have protection with her. She agreed to only date fellow students and never be alone in public. Gradually, I regained my composure. Sly urged me to talk to the DA, but he didn't anticipate the conversation I had. I presented a recording of my daughter discussing Sly and reminded him of Sly's attack on me. The DA inquired if I'd consider leniency toward Bev or dropping the charges. Absolutely not. I insisted on seeking the maximum penalty. Bev is under the control of this manipulative person, and separating them is the only way to help her. A stint in prison might straighten her out. The district attorney agreed, and the trial proceeded. I felt fairly confident at home and work, but there were moments of vulnerability, especially when entering or leaving the garage. However, I was cautious during my commute. Our house sits about 10 miles down the ranch road, with only one turnoff in the next 15 miles. I was well aware of other potential danger zones. During the long drive home, I always had my Beretta with me. One evening, a few days before Bev's trial, I noticed headlights of a pickup truck behind me about 2 miles from home, sending shivers down my spine. Soon, it was tailgating me aggressively, just 20 feet from my rear bumper, going 55 miles per hour. I called emergency on my phone and activated the voice recorder. As I accelerated to 70 miles per hour, the pickup kept pace. Frantically, I requested the emergency operator to contact the detective investigating my assault. The truck continued to tail me for another 5 miles as I narrated the situation. With the pistol lying next to me, I prepared for potential danger. As I approached a bridge spanning a small creek bed, I suspected the driver would attempt to force me off the road. Approaching the bridge, about 100 yards away, the pickup accelerated, indicating its intent to force me off the road. I briefly glimpsed Bev's face in the passenger seat as it pulled up beside me. I braked sharply, causing the car to skid, but maintaining control. Although the truck stopped ahead of me, my quick braking prevented a collision. My car slid to a halt by the roadside, its rear resting on a slope leading down to the creek bed. Exiting the car, I grabbed my weapon, phone, and recorder, descending the steep gravel slope beneath the bridge. As I descended, I noticed the pickup's brake lights illuminate. Navigating in the darkness, I cautiously felt my way under the bridge. Despite the risk of encountering a rattlesnake, I was more concerned about other dangers. Breathing heavily, I sought a secure hiding spot, eventually stopping and tilting the Beretta. I waited anxiously, but heard nothing for a while. Cell phone contact with emergency was lost. Attempting to redial in the dark proved futile due to poor signal reception. I was stuck, uncertain if help was on the way. At least the ominous growl of the pickup truck overhead was absent. I resolved to remain stationary, prepared to spend the night there if necessary. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 5 or 10 minutes before I heard a siren in the distance, approaching from the same direction as me. Realizing they were far behind, I began walking up the hill, leaving the Beretta under the bridge. Raising my hands as I approached the road, I implored the arriving police not to shoot. Observing 2 cars parked across the road, blocking both lanes, I heard sirens from the other side and saw a pickup truck heading back to the bridge. I stumbled and fell into the mud. While my view was limited, I heard the pickup screech to a stop, and officers ordered the driver to exit and lie on the ground. Other police cars following the pickup stopped behind it. Soon, Bev and Sly were in custody on attempted slaughter charges. Though deeply worried, I returned home, showered, and attempted to sleep to no avail. When your spouse faces multiple felonies, divorce appears remarkably straightforward. The judge expressed sympathy, and Bev and her lawyer offered little resistance. Desperate to minimize her prison sentence, Bev proposed conceding virtually everything in the divorce for assistance in reducing her punishment. During the sentencing hearing, I testified to Bev's prior virtues before falling under Sly's influence. I expressed a willingness to forgive her over time for attempting to end my life. Omitting her likely infidelity and years of torment, I could not interpret her facial expression in court, nor did I speak to her directly. Ultimately, Sly received a lengthy prison sentence. I hope he shares a cell with a burly inmate named Bubba, who finds him particularly appealing. The judge showed more leniency towards Bev, but she won't be eligible for parole for at least 3 years. So it's been approximately 4 years since Bev was incarcerated. The DA's office informed me that she was granted parole about a year ago. I kept waiting to hear from her, knowing she's not in contact with Patty. Revenge seemed promising, but it didn't live up to expectations. I found myself unable to stop dwelling on everything that had unfolded. So, unexpectedly, I reached out to my ex-wife. "Bev, this is Jack. I have something of yours, and I want it back." I phoned the rehab center where Bev resided now. For a few moments, there was no response. "Beverly, I want to give you a shoebox. Can you hear me? Can we arrange to meet so I can return it to you?" I thought she might hang up, but finally she responded, "Where? When? I don't care." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, like a restaurant, or she could come to my house. I suggested Sunday. "Are you free on Sunday?" After a brief silence, she replied, "I'll be there on Sunday." At 2 p.m., the phone rang. How does one prepare to confront their ex-wife, the mother of their child, the woman who attempted to eliminate them, and a convicted felon? I made lemonade and cookies. When Bev arrived, neither of us attempted to shake hands or hug. We exchanged greetings, and I motioned for her to enter the office. Her hair was much shorter than before, and her eyes were stern. She wasn't wearing much, if any, makeup now. At 50 years old, she looked 65. There were drinks, cookies, and a shoebox on the coffee table. She sat down opposite the sofa, and I offered her soft drinks, which she refused. Did she really suspect that I would try to poison her? Well, if you don't want lemonade and cookies, then I suppose all you need is the shoebox and whatever else we have to say to each other. What's the catch, Jack? What do you want instead? Is there anything left? She remained very suspicious. There's no trick, Bev. It's all there, except for a few thousand that I contributed with an equal amount of my own money and gave to Patty as a down payment for her house when she got married. If you wish, she can start returning your share at your convenience. I simply gave her my portion. I could see from Bev's expression that she didn't know Patty was married. Patty has been married for 2 years, and you're already a grandmother. I sensed the tension in her eyes as she struggled with her emotions. The little girl's name is Shannon Beverly Evans. Shannon is the name of her other grandmother. Bev's eyes filled with tears despite her best efforts. Bev, I know you haven't spoken to Patty in a while. There must be a way for you to reconnect. If you want, I can facilitate that. Beverly nodded, tears now streaming down her cheeks. I reached for the box of tissues I had placed on the coffee table. I'll give you the abridged version of our story if you're not ready to leave just yet, I said gently. She wiped tears from her cheek and tried to compose herself. Patty found a great guy named Stan Evans. He's into computers and networks. They seem to click really well. She's a fantastic mom, and they're deeply devoted to each other. Martha and I didn't last long. She's too young for me, and she just needed me temporarily until she could get her life back on track. She found someone else and moved on. I date occasionally, but I end things if it gets too serious. I'm better off solo. I'll stick to being single. There was silence for a while. I'm going to share some thoughts, mainly for my own benefit, but maybe you can glean something useful from them too. I hope so. I couldn't wait to see you in prison. I loathed you and wished you dead many times, but when they locked you up, my feelings started to shift. I found I couldn't revel in my victory anymore, so I let go of my hatred for you, even though you never asked for it. I forgave you because I know you're not entirely to blame. I couldn't understand you until it was too late, and we stopped communicating. We were just bickering. Beverly composed herself and looked up from the floor. She gave me a lost look but remained silent. That's the truth, succinctly and plainly. If you have nothing more to say, and if you're not hungry, I won't keep you any longer. You probably have important things to attend to. She stood up and took the box as she headed toward the front door. For the first time since I pushed her away all those years ago, I called out to her, "Beverly, it doesn't matter now, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm curious. Throughout our time together, especially on that last day you were here, it was clear that you saw me as weak. Do you still think I'm a pushover, Bev?" She paused with her hand on the doorknob and glanced back at me. She expressed her feelings bitterly, stating that she hated me and believed I had been cruel, asserting that I had ruined her life. After a moment of pause, she added that she didn't consider me to be a pushover. Following this statement, she disappeared from my life permanently.
John Griffin's family history was marked by both loyalty and struggle. Growing up, his father, a war veteran, instilled in his children the values of resilience and unity. Their mother's unexpected end of life when John was only 10 created a void that altered the dynamics within the family. While Carl sought solace in the streets, John focused on academics, becoming the steadying force in their household. This dichotomy defined their relationship. Carl's boldness and John's stability often clashed, but also complemented each other. In high school, John fell in love for the first time with a girl named Elena. She was vibrant, intelligent, and shared his passion for literature. Their bond was profound but short-lived. Elena's family relocated to Europe, leaving John heartbroken. This early experience with loss shaped his cautious approach to relationships, making him deeply value commitment and trust when he eventually met Linda years later. Before John married Linda, he briefly mentored troubled youth as part of a community outreach program. One boy, Marcus, stood out for his brilliance, but also his tendency to attract trouble. John's support helped Marcus secure a scholarship, and while they lost touch over time, John often thought of those days as some of the most rewarding in his life. Marcus would later reappear unexpectedly with news that would complicate John's world. During Linda's early career, she and John faced a financial crisis. A bad investment wiped out their savings, forcing John to work multiple jobs while Linda pursued her MBA. This period of hardship strengthened their bond and highlighted their resilience as a couple. John often reminisced about those lean years, viewing them as proof of their enduring partnership, unaware of the cracks forming beneath the surface. One summer, John and Carl embarked on a road trip to reconnect. They visited their childhood home, shared stories of their late mother, and camped under the stars. On this trip, Carl confided details about his past that John had never known, including a near-end encounter during his gang years. This moment solidified their relationship, with John urging Carl to turn his life around, an appeal that eventually led Carl to leave his criminal activities behind. At a neighborhood barbecue 3 years before Linda's business trips became frequent, John met a man named Richard who worked in corporate security. They struck up a friendship, and Richard's stories of uncovering corporate fraud intrigued John. Though he didn't know it then, this connection would later prove invaluable when John's suspicions about Linda began to grow, setting the stage for truths he never imagined confronting. John Griffin sat in his dimly lit living room, the faint light of the television flickering against the walls. Though the show played on, his thoughts wandered elsewhere. Earlier that day, his wife Linda had flown to Florida for a business trip. John had always trusted her. Jealousy had never been part of his nature, but tonight an unshakable unease lingered in his chest, gnawing at his sense of calm. The sudden chime of his phone broke his train of thought. Glancing at the screen, he saw the caller ID, Carl, his older brother. "Hey, Carl," John said, trying to sound casual. "What's going on?" Carl Griffin wasn't just his brother. He was a man with a reputation. Once a feared gangster with a violent past, Carl had ruled the streets with ruthless efficiency. His enemies vanished, his rivals crumbled, and his name carried an air of dread. But to John, Carl was family, a fiercely loyal protector who had left that dark world behind at John's urging, seeking a quieter, more respectable life. "Not much," Carl replied, his tone calm but serious. "But we need to talk." John frowned, sensing the weight behind Carl's words. "What about—" "I've been keeping tabs on Linda," Carl said, his voice steady but laced with something unspoken. "She's in Florida, yeah, but I saw something that doesn't sit right." A chill ran through John. "What are you trying to say?" Carl's response was blunt. She's with another man. This trip? It's not just business. John's breath caught. Are you sure? That's a big accusation, Carl. I'm sure, Carl said firmly. I saw her, kissing him, and I've got the evidence to back it up. John felt his stomach twist as his phone buzzed with an incoming message. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing photos and videos. In one image, Linda was locked in an intimate kiss with a man John didn't recognize. Another showed them laughing and holding hands in a hotel lobby. A video captured them in a car, her hand tangled in his hair, his arm draped possessively around her waist. This can't be real, John murmured, his voice breaking. It's real, Carl said, his tone as cold as steel. You needed to know. I wasn't about to let you stay in the dark. John's grip on the phone tightened, anger rising to the surface. If you knew, why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted to be certain, Carl replied evenly. You don't go throwing around accusations like this without proof. Now you have it. John's mind reeled, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief, betrayal, and rage. What am I supposed to do with this, Carl? You need to think smart, Carl said. Get a private investigator. Gather solid evidence. If this leads to divorce, you'll need leverage. Without it, you're walking into a storm, unarmed. I don't want to go there, John said, his voice strained. That's not me. I just want the truth. And how do you plan to get it? Carl challenged. If you confront her without proof, she'll deny everything. Or worse, turn it around on you. You can't afford to play this wrong. John exhaled deeply, his mind racing. Carl's advice made sense, but the thought of hiring a private investigator felt alien, invasive. I don't know, Carl. This feels messy. It is messy, Carl said sharply, but sitting back won't make it go away. Protect yourself, John. Get the evidence, then decide what to do. John rubbed his temple, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. And if I don't, what if I just let it slide? Then you'll live with the lie, Carl said bluntly, and she'll keep walking all over you. Look, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but ignoring it won't make it better. Do it smart, or don't do it at all. For a moment, John was silent, staring at the damning photos on his phone. Fine, he said finally, his voice tight. I'll hire the PI, but Carl, if I ever get my hands on this guy... Stop, Carl interrupted sharply. Don't go down that road. I've seen where revenge leads, and trust me, it's not worth it. Let the investigator handle it. Keep your head on straight. John closed his eyes, forcing himself to calm down. All right, he muttered. I'll handle this your way. But if there's more... Don't let your anger take over, Carl warned. I'm here, John. We'll figure it out. Just be smart about it. After hanging up, John sat in silence, Carl's words echoing in his head. The betrayal cut deep, and the idea of investigating his wife felt like a betrayal of his own. Yet the evidence Carl had provided was undeniable. His phone buzzed again, notifications piling up, texts from friends and one from Linda. Steeling himself, he opened her message. Miss you so much. Can't wait to be back home. Moments later, his phone rang. It was Linda. John hesitated before answering, forcing himself to sound normal. Hey, babe. Hey, you, Linda replied cheerfully, her voice warm and familiar. How's everything? I miss you. John clenched his jaw, the images flashing in his mind. I miss you too, he said carefully. How's Florida? Busy, but good, she said lightly. Just 2 more days and I'll be home. 2 more days, John echoed, keeping his tone even. You okay? Linda asked, her voice softening. You sound off. I'm fine, John lied. Just tired. Well, I'll make it up to you when I'm back, she said playfully. I promise. Looking forward to it, John replied, his voice strained. John set the phone down, his hands trembling. The silence in the room was deafening as he stared at it, unable to reconcile Linda's warm, affectionate voice with the betrayal he knew existed. The images and videos Carl had sent were burned into his mind, each one a cruel reminder that their life together was no longer what he thought. Yet, Linda's cheerful words, her loving tone, felt like she was still playing a part in the relationship they had built over the years. But now, the illusion was gone. She had crossed a line and John couldn't ignore it anymore. All he could do was wait, for answers, for clarity. 2 more days. It felt like forever. The next morning, determined to find the truth, John took Carl's advice. He couldn't sit in the uncertainty any longer. After some quick research, he found a private investigator named Frank, who came highly recommended. By that afternoon, John was sitting in Frank's modest office, the smell of coffee and leather filling the air. Frank, a sharp-eyed, no-nonsense man, greeted him with a firm handshake and motioned for him to sit. "All right, Mr. Griffin, I've gone through your notes, but I need to hear it from you. What's going on?" John took a deep breath, struggling to put his pain into words. "My wife, Linda, has been traveling a lot for work. A few days ago, my brother told me he saw her with another man, kissing him. He sent me pictures and videos. I need to know if it's true, if there's more to it. I just can't live like this, not knowing." Frank nodded, jotting notes on a pad. "Got it. We'll run surveillance and get you what you need. I've handled cases like this before. You'll get your answers." "How long will it take?" John asked, his voice tight with apprehension. "Could be a few days, maybe a week." "It depends on her schedule, but I'll get you something concrete," Frank assured him. John handed over the retainer, his hands shaking. "I just need the truth. I can't make a mistake here." Frank met his gaze. "You're doing the right thing. Leave the rest to me." The next day, Linda returned home from Florida, all smiles and excitement. She greeted John with a warm hug and a kiss, acting as if nothing had changed. "I missed you so much," she said, her eyes bright. John forced a smile, keeping his tone even. "I missed you too. How was the trip?" "It was fine," she replied cheerfully, "but I'm glad to be home." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a playful tone. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. I need you." John's stomach churned, but he kept his composure. "Actually, I hurt my back while you were gone," he lied. "I think I need to rest tonight." Linda pouted but nodded. "Okay, but don't keep me waiting too long," she teased before heading to their bedroom. John stood frozen, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. How could she act so normal after everything he'd seen? That night, while Linda slept soundly beside him, John lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He felt trapped between the life they had shared and the truth he couldn't ignore. A week later, John's phone buzzed. It was Frank. His heart raced as he answered. "What do you have for me?" he asked, his voice tense. "We need to talk in person," Frank said. "I have the report ready. It's important." "Is it bad?" John pressed, dread pooling in his chest. Frank hesitated. "Come to the office. I'll explain everything." John closed his eyes, bracing himself. The waiting was over, but the answers might be more than he could handle. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said before hanging up. He stared at the phone in his hand, his pulse pounding. The truth was within reach, and there was no turning back now. John entered Frank's office, his nerves frayed and his heart heavy. The weight of what he was about to learn pressed on him like a boulder. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew it wouldn't be good. Frank stood behind his cluttered desk, holding a glass of whiskey. "You look like you need something stronger than coffee," he said, sliding a shot of Jack Daniels across the desk. John picked up the glass and downed it in one gulp, the burn grounding him for a moment. "Thanks," he said, his voice strained. "Just lay it out for me. What did you find?" Frank pushed a thick folder toward him. "This is everything. I won't sugarcoat it. You're not going to like it." With trembling hands, John opened the folder. Inside were pictures, clear enough to remove any doubt. Linda was with two different men, Timothy Brown, her boss, and Alex Williams, the CEO. The photos weren't innocent. They showed closeness that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. Frank broke the silence. "She's not just cheating, John. She's involved with both of them, and not just separately, sometimes together. It's been going on for at least 2 years. John's breath hitched as he flipped through the damning evidence. Photos, emails, and explicit messages. The betrayal cut deeper than he could have imagined. 2 years? He whispered. How could she hide this for so long? Frank nodded grimly. She's been careful, but not careful enough. I found texts, emails, even videos. This isn't just an affair, it's a lifestyle. John's hands shook as he skimmed through the explicit texts and watched a short video clip, his stomach churning. The Linda he saw in these exchanges was a stranger, callous, unfaithful, and cruel. In one particularly painful message, Linda dismissed John entirely. John's good with the kids and pays the bills, she wrote. Why not keep him around? He's just a means to an end. John felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She called me a loser, he muttered, the words barely audible. His wife, the woman he trusted with his heart, had reduced him to a convenient tool. Frank leaned forward, his expression serious. I know this is a lot to process, but you've got what you need. You can confront her or take legal action. Whatever you do, Think it through. Don't act on anger alone. John nodded numbly, his mind reeling. I don't even know where to start, he admitted. What do I say? How do I face her? That's up to you, Frank replied. But now you have control, you know the truth, and you can decide what comes next. John rose from the chair, the folder clutched in his hand like a lifeline. Thanks, Frank, he said, though his voice was hollow. The truth was supposed to set him free, but all it had done was trap him in a new kind of torment. That night, John sat alone at his desk, his laptop open. He scrolled through the evidence again, each word and image cutting deeper than the last. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional, financial, and personal. His wife had not only lied to him, but had belittled him, mocked him, and dismissed him as insignificant. John's thoughts swirled in a storm of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. The life he thought he knew had been an illusion, and the woman he loved had turned it into a farce. Now, all that remained was deciding what to do with the shards of the truth. The next video hit John like a gut punch. This time, Linda was talking to Alex Williams. This marriage is just a facade, she said casually, her tone void of remorse. John's a good provider, but he's never been what I wanted. He's so dull in bed. I want someone who's aggressive, someone who takes charge. I'm just using him. Nice house, kids, stability. As long as I keep the act up, I can still have my fun with you guys. What does it matter? John's chest tightened. He had always believed their life together was built on love and partnership. They had raised 2 boys, shared milestones and weathered challenges side by side, or so he thought. But this wasn't just infidelity. It was outright mockery, Linda admitting she used him for appearances and financial security while living a double life. Then, the worst blow came. As he scrolled through more messages, he stumbled upon a chilling text Linda had sent to Timothy. If John ever finds out, I'll ruin him, she wrote. I'll tell the kids he's abusive. He won't stand a chance if I accuse him of hitting me. I'll take the house, the savings, everything. He's a sucker, and I'm the one in control. John froze, his blood running cold. The words echoed in his head like a nightmare. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated plan to destroy him. She had no fear of him discovering the truth because she believed she could dismantle his life completely and emerge unscathed. The arrogance, the cold manipulation was staggering. He slammed the laptop shut, his hands trembling. His mind raced, trying to process the depth of Linda's deception. She had built their life together on lies, using him as a pawn in her selfish game. The worst part? She knew he was trapped. She banked on his love for their boys, on his fear of losing them, to keep him in check. Pacing the room, John ran his hands through his hair, anger and heartbreak swirling together. He felt like a prisoner in his own life, manipulated by the one person he had trusted the most. How had he been so blind? How could he have missed all the signs? His love for Linda had kept him from seeing the truth. And now, the reality of who she was crushed him. But one thing was clear. He couldn't stay in this marriage. Not after this. If Linda was willing to destroy him and weaponize their family for her own selfish gain, he had to fight back. Not just for himself, but for his boys. He wouldn't let her win. Grabbing his phone, he dialed Carl, his fingers trembling. His brother answered almost immediately. "Carl, it's John," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I've seen everything. I can't stay in this marriage. She's been lying to me, using me, and now she's threatening to take everything. I don't know how I'm going to fight her, but I have to try." Carl's voice was steady, a lifeline in the chaos. "We'll figure this out, John. Don't rush into anything. You've got the evidence now. We'll take it step by step, and make sure you protect yourself and your boys. I'm with you, whatever you need." John exhaled shakily, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The road ahead would be brutal, but for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't powerless anymore. That evening, John sat at the dinner table, his mind churning as Linda walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She breezed into the room, smiling brightly and chatting about her day as if everything was perfectly normal. Sliding into her seat, she launched into a story about a successful meeting, excitedly sharing how she'd closed a major deal for the company. She radiated confidence, completely oblivious to the storm brewing within John. John set his fork down, his gaze fixed on her. This is it, he thought, the moment of reckoning. But not yet. Let her feel the pressure first. "So," he said casually, masking his simmering anger, "how was your day?" Linda grinned, not catching the tension in his tone. "It was amazing. We nailed a huge deal today. I'm on cloud 9. What about you? Anything exciting happen? John leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly. Nothing much. Same old. He let the silence stretch for a moment before adding, I was just wondering, though, what would you do if you found out I was seeing 2 women? Linda laughed, her response almost flippant. Oh, I'd cut you off in every way. You'd be sleeping in the guest room nursing some serious regrets, that's for sure. John let out a slow breath, a sly smile creeping across his face. Interesting, he said smoothly. Because if I found out you were seeing 2 men, I guess I'd be justified in doing the same. Her laughter faltered, the smile slipping from her face. She set her fork down carefully, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice uncertain. John kept his tone steady, his gaze unflinching. Oh, nothing. Just curious if you'd apply the same standards to yourself. You know, hypothetically. Her confidence wavered, her smile now forced. You're being ridiculous, John. I don't know where this is coming from, but it's not funny. John leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. You're right. It's not funny, but I think you'll find it less amusing when I have everything I need to prove what you've been up to. Linda's face paled, her eyes darting away for a split second before she forced herself to meet his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, trying to regain her composure. You're acting crazy. John shook his head, his tone light but laced with menace. Don't worry, Linda. I'm sure you'll have a perfectly good explanation. I'll give you plenty of time to come up with it. She sat frozen, her mask of confidence completely shattered. The cracks in her demeanor were obvious now, her fear palpable. John rose from his seat slowly, the chair scraping against the floor as he stood. He paused, letting the silence stretch unbearably, then turned and walked out of the room. He didn't need to say anything more. Her reaction had told him everything he needed to know. The next day, John met Carl at a quiet coffee shop. They exchanged few words, their mutual understanding filling the silence. The events of the previous evening played over and over in John's mind, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of direction. I'm done, John said finally, breaking the silence. I can't live like this anymore. She's crossed every line. It's time to take control. Carl nodded, his voice firm. You're doing the right thing. She's been getting away with this for too long. You've got my support, and we'll make sure she doesn't walk all over you. John took a deep breath, grateful for Carl's unwavering presence. He wasn't alone in this fight. With his brother by his side, he finally felt ready to confront the lies, protect his future, and rebuild the pieces of his life that Linda had so carelessly shattered. Together, they would make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Later that day, John and Carl met with a highly recommended divorce lawyer, renowned for his relentless courtroom tactics. The lawyer's sleek, modern office exuded professionalism and authority, designed to intimidate and impress. It was clear this was the kind of place people came when they needed results, no matter the cost. Walking in, John felt a pang of unease. This was a step he never thought he'd take, but it was now his only choice. The lawyer, a sharp-dressed man in his 40s, stood to greet them with a practiced smile and a firm handshake. Mr. Griffin, the lawyer said, his tone polished and professional. Let's get started. I understand we have a complicated case on our hands. John matched his handshake, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Yes, I'm ready to move forward. They sat down, and the lawyer wasted no time. Here's the plan. We'll file for divorce immediately, but I understand you also want to pursue an alienation of affection lawsuit against her boss and the CEO, correct? John nodded firmly. Yes, they enabled the affair. They knew what was going on and didn't stop it. I want them held accountable. The lawyer raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. That's a bold move, but it could work. To succeed, we'll need airtight evidence. I'll handle the legal strategy, but you'll need to organize your financial situation. We need a clear picture of your assets, liabilities, and income before we proceed. John hesitated for a moment, realizing how much he had trusted Linda to handle their finances. I'll pull everything together, he said, running a hand through his hair. Bank statements, investments, retirement accounts, whatever you need. The lawyer nodded, jotting down notes. Good. The faster you get me those details, the sooner we can move forward. In the meantime, we'll prepare the divorce paperwork and the lawsuit. John leaned back in his chair, feeling overwhelmed but resolute. The betrayal had been devastating, but he was determined to fight for his future. Let's move quickly, he said firmly. I'm done waiting. The lawyer gave him a reassuring nod. I'll have the paperwork ready in 3 days. Focus on your finances and any additional evidence we can use. We'll take it from there. As John and Carl left the office, Carl gave his brother a supportive pat on the back. You're doing the right thing, he said. We'll get through this, no matter what. 3 days later, John returned to the lawyer's office, this time with Carl by his side. Tension and anticipation hung in the air as they prepared for the next steps. John had made a bold decision. He transferred all his assets to Carl for a nominal amount and loaned him his savings under the guise of a business venture. It was a risky but strategic move to shield his finances from Linda's grasp. The lawyer greeted them with a curious look as they sat down. Carl wasted no time explaining. John has loaned me his savings and transferred all assets to my name for a business venture. The house, investments, everything. It's no longer tied to him. The lawyer smirked slightly, leaning back in his chair. Unconventional, but effective. If the judge isn't biased, this could work. It's risky, but I've seen worse. John's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. I don't care if it's risky. I'm making sure Linda can't take anything. She won't touch the house, the savings, or my future. This is about protecting what's mine. The lawyer nodded, his demeanor turning serious. Understood. I'll get the divorce paperwork ready and include a restraining order. You're within your rights to ensure she stays away from the kids and your property. John's voice was steady, his resolve unshakable. Yes, I want her out of my life and away from my kids. She's done enough damage, and I won't let her manipulate them. Carl chimed in, his tone firm. He's right. We need to protect the boys. She's not fit to be around them after everything. The lawyer jotted down more notes. We'll file for the restraining order alongside the divorce, but be prepared. This won't be easy. She's going to fight back. John clenched his fists at the thought of Linda's inevitable retaliation. He knew she wouldn't let him go without a fight, but it no longer mattered. He was done playing her games. His focus was now on his children, keeping them safe and ensuring their future. I'm ready for whatever's next, John said, locking eyes with the lawyer. Make sure the papers are ready. I want her served immediately. The lawyer nodded, already scribbling notes. We'll file the restraining order and divorce papers together. She'll be served within the next few days. John stood, a grim determination settling over him. This was the first step toward freedom. It wouldn't be easy, but he was prepared to fight. Carl gave him an encouraging nod, and John turned to the lawyer. Just get it done, John said firmly. No delays. The lawyer's approving glance spoke volumes. We're on it, John. Trust me. We're in this to win. At that same moment, Linda was in the CEO's office, tangled in yet another clandestine affair. She had played this dangerous game for over 2 years, always confident she could keep it hidden. But today felt different. The door was locked, the blinds drawn, but their moment of closeness was interrupted by a sharp knock. Both froze, panic flashing across their faces as they scrambled to adjust their clothes. The CEO fastened his belt while Linda smoothed her blouse, her pulse racing. Who is it? The CEO barked, irritation lacing his voice. The knock came again, more insistent. The door creaked open and a man in a sharp suit stepped inside, holding 3 sealed manila envelopes. He spoke with calm authority. You've been served. Divorce petition for Miss Linda Griffin, a restraining order, and a $20 million alienation of affection lawsuit against the company. Linda's face drained of color as she took the envelope, her hands trembling. The CEO, visibly rattled, accepted his as well. John did this? He asked, his voice strained. What the hell is going on? Linda tore open her envelope, her stomach twisting as she scanned the documents. It was official. John wasn't just walking away, he was fighting back. The restraining order barred her from their children, and the lawsuit struck at the heart of her career. Her carefully crafted facade was crumbling. How did he find out? She whispered, anger bubbling beneath her fear. She had underestimated John, always thinking of him as predictable and weak. But now, he had turned the tables. This is a disaster, the CEO muttered, pacing the room. We need to handle this carefully. The company's reputation is at stake. Linda barely heard him. Her thoughts raced as the enormity of the situation sank in. John hadn't just exposed her. He had launched an attack that threatened her career, reputation, and financial stability. Before they could regroup, the head of HR walked into the office, his expression cold. Alex, Linda, he said, his tone firm, you're both required to vacate immediately. Your access to company assets and premises has been revoked. The CEO's face paled. What? This has to be a mistake. No mistake, HR replied curtly. The board, shareholders, and head office have reviewed the evidence, texts, emails, videos. Terminations are effective immediately. Legal will handle your severance and benefits. Linda's heart pounded as she looked between the HR head and Alex. Everything was unraveling too quickly. Her affair, her manipulations, her career. What she'd worked so hard to hide was now exposed. Alex, pale and stunned, turned to the HR head. "You can't just do this. I've given years to this company. What about everything I've built here?" The HR head's expression remained cold. "The company doesn't tolerate this kind of behavior. You've compromised not just your position, but the organization's integrity. Shareholders will decide the next steps, but for now, you're both out. Clear your desks and leave." He shifted his gaze to Linda. "Your access to the building and company systems is revoked. Make arrangements to gather your belongings by the end of the day." Alex clenched his fists but knew he had no choice. He turned to Linda. "We'll figure this out. We need to make some calls. This can't be the end." But Linda wasn't listening. Her thoughts were fixated on the evidence, emails, texts, and videos that had been sent to the board, the shareholders, and everyone else who mattered. The truth was out, and there was no undoing it. As they began packing their belongings, Alex's phone buzzed relentlessly. Glancing at the screen, his face went pale. "It's my wife," he muttered. She knows. She knows everything." His hands shook as he typed a hasty reply, desperate to salvage something. Linda glanced at her own phone, which was flooded with notifications. Texts, emails, missed calls. Each one felt like another piece of her life crumbling away. By the time Linda reached her car, her phone rang again. It was Timothy Brown, her boss, his voice frantic. "Linda, I've been served. Divorce papers, restraining orders. What's happening? My wife has everything. Texts, videos, the works. We're both screwed." Linda gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "It's over, Timothy," she said flatly. "John has it all. He's filing lawsuits, and the company's done with us. There's no way out." Timothy swore loudly. "My wife's already served me. Same as you. I'm finished." The weight of the situation hit Linda like a physical blow. It wasn't just her marriage crumbling. It was her entire life. Her career, reputation, and everything she had built were gone. She wasn't alone in her downfall. Alex and Timothy were suffering the same fate. By the end of the day, both men had received divorce papers and restraining orders from their wives, sealing their disgrace. Sitting in her car, Linda clutched her phone, staring blankly ahead. Everything was over. The lies, the betrayal, they had all come back to destroy her. Across town, John sat with Carl, watching the aftermath unfold. "It's done," John said quietly, his voice firm. "Linda was served, the company's reeling, and I've finally taken back control of my life." Carl nodded. "You did the right thing. Don't let her mess with your head anymore." While John felt a semblance of peace returning, Linda simmered with anger. Days of humiliation and bitterness consumed her. John had exposed her, taken everything from her, and left her life in shambles. Now all she wanted was revenge. In Alex's dimly lit apartment, Linda, Alex, and Timothy huddled around a table, their voices low and urgent. The rage in Linda's eyes was unmistakable. She was no longer the woman trying to keep up appearances. She was someone consumed by vengeance. "He has to pay," Linda hissed, her fists tightening. "I want him to suffer the way I have. I want him gone." Alex, trying to remain composed, exchanged a glance with Timothy. "We'll need a solid plan. No mistakes. It has to look like an accident." Timothy, known for his recklessness, smirked darkly. "Don't worry. He'll never see it coming." As John sat at home, the silence around him only amplified the emotional wreckage of the past few days. The house was eerily quiet, with only the occasional creak of the floorboards or the hum of the refrigerator breaking the stillness. Carl stayed close, vigilant and ready for anything. Knowing Linda's escalating fury made the situation volatile. Despite his physical and emotional exhaustion, John drew comfort from Carl's steady presence. Around midnight, a sharp, loud knock shattered the quiet. "Who the hell is that?" John muttered, startled. Carl was already on his feet, instinctively reaching for the weapon he kept nearby. Before he could get to the door, it burst open, and Linda stormed in, followed by Alex and Timothy. The tension in the room exploded as Linda pulled a tool from her bag, her shaking hands aiming the barrel directly at John. "Did you really think you could ruin my life and walk away unscathed?" Linda hissed, her voice venomous. Her wild eyes betrayed the unstable fury driving her actions. Before John could respond, 2 firearm discharges rang out. He doubled over, collapsing to the floor, clutching his stomach as his breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. The metallic tang of blood filled the air as Carl moved swiftly, grabbing his tool from the drawer and firing back with precision. "Get out of here!" Carl shouted, his voice commanding as bullets splintered the walls around them. Linda screamed, ducking behind Alex and Timothy as the chaotic exchange unfolded. Carl's quick response caught them off guard. Panic overtook their bravado, and they scrambled for the door. Their retreat was frantic, their plan unraveling in the face of Carl's fierce defense. Linda was the first to flee, with Alex and Timothy close behind. The sound of their footsteps faded into the night as Carl turned his attention to John. "John!" Carl dropped to his knees, placing his hands over John's stomach in an attempt to stop the bleeding. His voice was steady but urgent as he pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. "My brother's been shot. 2 firearm discharge wounds to the stomach," Carl said urgently. "We need an ambulance now." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as help neared. Carl stayed by John's side, applying pressure to the wounds, his voice low and steady as he tried to keep John conscious. "Stay with me, John. You're going to be okay." Hours later, John lay unconscious in a hospital bed, stabilized but weakened from the ordeal. Carl paced the waiting room, the gravity of the night pressing heavily on him. Police had already begun piecing together the events. Evidence left behind, coupled with neighborhood surveillance footage, gave them a clear trail. Linda, Alex, and Timothy were now fugitives. As the authorities issued an APB for the trio, Carl couldn't shake the image of his brother gravely injured, lying helpless on the floor. His anger simmered, and the desire for retribution grew stronger with every passing moment. Carl sat alone in his car, gripping the steering wheel as his thoughts churned. Linda and her lovers had tried to take everything from John: his life, his dignity, his family. They had crossed a line, and Carl couldn't let it go unanswered. Reaching for his phone, Carl dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A gravelly voice answered almost immediately. "Carl, it's been a while. What's going on?" "I need the crew," Carl said, his tone cold and resolute. "John was attacked. Linda and her lovers did it. We're going after them." There was a brief pause before the voice replied, "Say no more. Where do you need us?" Carl quickly laid out the plan. A few of his trusted crew members would stay behind to guard John at the hospital, ensuring no further threats reached him while he recovered. The others would join Carl in tracking down Linda, Alex, and Timothy. These men were no strangers to taking care of unfinished business, and Carl didn't need to elaborate. They knew exactly what was at stake. Carl immediately called the private investigator who had managed to uncover Linda's location after the shooting. "She's staying at 4516 Edgewood Avenue," the PI said. "She's there with the other 2. Be careful." "Thanks," Carl replied, his voice cold and resolute. Gathering his crew, Carl drove toward the address. The tension in the car was thick, every man focused and ready. There was no room for hesitation. Linda and her accomplices needed to face the consequences of their actions, and Carl was determined to ensure they couldn't run. When they arrived, they surrounded the house swiftly and silently. Through the lit windows, shadows moved inside. Carl gave a signal, and his men burst through the door, splintering it with a crash. The house erupted in chaos as Carl's crew flooded in, tools drawn. Inside, Linda, Alex, and Timothy froze in shock, their expressions shifting from confusion to fear. "What is this?" Alex stammered, but Carl silenced him with a glare, stepping forward. "You've caused enough damage," Carl said coldly. "Now you're going to pay." Linda's bravado evaporated as fear took over. "Wait, Carl," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "This isn't what it looks like. They forced me into this." "Shut up!" Carl snapped, motioning for his men to restrain them. Linda, Alex, and Timothy were bound tightly and shoved against the wall. Carl loomed over them, his voice low and menacing. "You thought you could ruin John's life and walk away? You were wrong." Linda squirmed, her wide eyes filled with panic. "You can't do this," she cried. Carl leaned closer, his tone ice cold. "You're out of options. No one's coming to save you." The room fell silent except for their shallow breaths. Carl's men secured the house, ensuring there was no chance of escape. This wasn't about ending them. Not yet. It was about making them understand the consequences of their betrayal. "You're going to wish you never crossed my family," Carl said, his words cutting through the still air. "This is only the beginning." The crew moved quickly, transporting the restrained Linda, Alex, and Timothy in a convoy of 3 SUVs. The captives sat in the lead vehicle, bound and gagged, their muffled protests ignored. The atmosphere inside the cars was tense, charged with purpose. Carl sat in the second vehicle, his face set with a grim determination. His brother's life was hanging by a thread, and Carl wasn't about to let those responsible get away unscathed. One of the drivers broke the silence. "Are you sure about this, boss? This is serious." Carl didn't hesitate. "They tried to liquidate my brother. They crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. They'll pay for what they've done." The driver nodded, saying nothing more as they approached a remote location Carl had chosen carefully. Isolated and barren, it was the perfect spot for what he had in mind. The convoy crossed the border without issue, their movements efficient and practiced. Carl's crew had seen dangerous situations before, but this was different. This was personal. Under the moonlit sky, the SUVs rolled to a stop in a dusty clearing. The men exited the vehicles and dragged the captives out, their struggles futile. Thrown to the ground, Linda, Alex, and Timothy knelt in the dirt, their wide, fearful eyes darting between Carl and his crew. Carl stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dry earth. His gaze was icy, his voice calm but laced with fury. "You thought you could destroy my family and just walk away?" He shook his head slowly, his expression hard. "You've made a terrible mistake." Linda's tear-streaked face turned toward him, silently pleading, while Alex and Timothy avoided his eyes, their panic unmistakable. Carl crossed his arms, his crew standing silently behind him, waiting for his next command. "This is what happens when you mess with my family," Carl said, his tone final. "You don't walk away. You don't get a second chance. You face the consequences." The glade fell silent, an oppressive stillness blanketing the area as Carl's words hung in the air like a dark omen. The three captives quivered where they knelt, their fear palpable and raw. Carl paced methodically, his boots grinding against the loose gravel. The moonlight glanced off the machete in his hand, casting a cold, merciless gleam that mirrored his resolve. Linda, Alex, and Timothy whimpered softly, their muffled cries barely discernible in the suffocating quiet. Stopping a short distance from the trio, Carl raised his hand, signaling one of his men. Without a word, the subordinate stepped forward, placing the weapon into Carl's waiting grasp before retreating into the shadows. Carl turned the machete slowly, inspecting the blade as though weighing his next course of action. His voice, low and steady, sliced through the silence. "You know," he began, his tone calm yet laced with menace, "I gave up that life. The crime, the violence, all for my brother and his kids. They were my anchor, the reason I tried to be better." He paused, his piercing gaze flicking between the captives, ensuring every word struck its intended target. "But then there's people like you," he continued, his voice hardening with each word. "You push, you destroy lives, and now, here I am, dragged back to the darkness I fought so hard to escape." Carl moved closer to Linda, his imposing frame casting a long shadow over her trembling form. "You've stirred something in me," he murmured, his voice dropping to an almost intimate whisper. "Something I thought I'd buried for good. You brought the devil out of his grave." A tense, loaded silence engulfed the clearing. At Carl's signal, two of his men yanked Linda to her feet. She swayed unsteadily, her knees buckling beneath her as they forced her upright. "Turn her around," Carl commanded. One of his men roughly spun her to face Alex and Timothy, who remained bound and kneeling. Carl loomed behind her, resting the blade casually on his shoulder. "Let me ask you the same question my brother once asked," he said, leaning in close to Linda's ear. "What happens when John finds you like this, with two men?" Linda gasped sharply, frozen in terror. Her eyes darted helplessly to Alex and Timothy, their own expressions wide with horror. The tension was stifling, broken only by the faint rustling of the wind through the surrounding trees. Carl remained still, his face a mask of cold indifference, the blade in his hand catching faint glints of moonlight. "You were so bold before, Linda," Carl said with quiet disdain, his voice dropping to a mocking tone. "Wasn't it you who said, 'You chop balls'? Well then." Her strangled sob was the only response she could muster. Carl gestured sharply, and his men seized Alex and Timothy, dragging them to the ground despite their desperate attempts to resist. Their muffled cries grew louder, but Carl's demeanor remained icily detached. "Hold them," Carl ordered. His men tightened their grip, pinning the two down as they thrashed against their restraints. Alex's eyes bulged in terror, and Timothy's struggles grew frantic. Carl approached Timothy first, his movements deliberate and calculated, like a hunter circling its prey. Crouching to meet his captive's gaze, Carl spoke softly, his words carrying a chilling finality. "You thought you could destroy my brother's life, take his family, and walk away unscathed?" he said, his tone calm, almost conversational. "Actions have consequences. Now you'll face yours." With a firm resolve, Carl swung the machete downward. A loud crash echoed through the clearing as it struck the ground near Alex, a sharp sound that sent shivers through everyone present. Dark stains spread across the ground as Carl shifted his focus to Timothy. Linda's sobs grew louder, her body racked with uncontrollable shudders as she witnessed the grisly scene. "Please!" she cried through her gag, her voice fractured and desperate. "Stop! Please!" Carl didn't so much as glance at her. His cold focus shifted to Alex. "And you," he said, his voice razor-sharp, "thought your wealth and power made you untouchable, that you could destroy lives without consequence." He leaned in closer, his tone dropping to a whisper. "Think again." Carl swung the machete once more, its motion deliberate and unyielding. Timothy gasped sharply, his panic evident as Carl's steely gaze held steady. A silent warning to all who opposed him. His voice, sharp and commanding, broke through the aftermath. "Take them," he instructed his men, motioning toward the two maimed captives. "Dump them at the nearest hospital, alive." Turning to Linda, now collapsed in a heap of despair, Carl's eyes burned with cold fury. "You," he hissed, "aren't walking away either, but first, you'll learn what happens when you cross the wrong man." Carl's silhouette loomed over her trembling form, the machete dripping onto the parched earth below. His expression was unreadable, his voice eerily calm as he tilted his head, speaking with a sinister edge. "Linda," he said, his tone mockingly regretful, "it seems I underestimated what needed to be done. But don't worry, I'll correct that mistake." Linda's expression twisted in a mixture of terror and bewilderment, her trembling lips parting as though to speak, but no sound came. Carl loomed closer, his towering frame radiating menace, until his face was just inches from hers. In a voice so cold it seemed to freeze the air, he whispered, "I should have started with you." The weight of his words struck Linda like a hammer blow. A guttural scream tore from her throat, cutting through the still night as Carl moved with deadly precision. The machete swung through the air, its motion swift and deliberate, leaving an indelible mark on the tense atmosphere of the clearing. Linda crumpled to the ground, clutching her chest as agony racked her body. Her cries were primal, raw, and unrelenting, echoing into the emptiness around her. Carl stood over her, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, his face carved from stone. He watched impassively as Linda convulsed, tears streaking her face, her screams devolving into hoarse, ragged sobs. "Now you understand," Carl said, his voice devoid of warmth. "That's the kind of pain you've inflicted on others, through your lies, your betrayals, your greed. You've made suffering your currency, and now you're paying the price." For a moment, the clearing was silent except for Linda's shuddering gasps. Carl wiped the machete clean on the hem of his jacket with methodical precision. His gaze swept to his men, who stood at the edges of the scene, their faces grim and resolute. "Do you know why we call this place the Spot?" Carl asked, his voice cutting through the silence like the edge of his blade. Linda lifted her head weakly, her face contorted in pain, unable to respond. Her faint, gasping breaths were the only acknowledgement she could muster. Carl's lips curled into a dark smile, his eyes scanning the tree line. "It's where we leave the scraps for the scavengers." As if summoned, faint shapes began to appear at the perimeter of the clearing. Jackals and coyotes emerged cautiously from the shadows, their glowing eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. They sniffed the blood-soaked air, their low growls and yips building into a chorus of hunger. Carl jerked his head toward the vehicles parked in the distance. "We're done here," he said coldly. "Let nature take care of the rest." Without hesitation, the group began to retreat, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel as the scavengers crept closer. Linda's muffled cries mingled with the growls of the advancing beasts, the horrifying sounds fading into the night as Carl and his men disappeared into the darkness. The sterile hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the bed where John lay, his face pale but composed. A uniformed officer stood nearby, his tone professional yet detached as he spoke. "We recovered remains near the border," the officer reported. "It appears they were attacked by animals, your wife and 2 unidentified men. It was a gruesome scene." He paused briefly, studying John's reaction. "Unless new evidence surfaces, the case will be closed." John nodded slowly, murmuring his thanks. As the officer left, his gaze shifted to Carl, who sat by the window, his posture casual but his eyes fixed on the hospital parking lot below. "Carl," John said softly, his voice steady despite its weakness. "Was it you?" For a long moment, Carl didn't respond, his focus remaining on the view outside. Then, with a slight shrug, he turned to face his brother, his expression unreadable. "I wouldn't know anything about that," Carl replied evenly, a faint twitch at the corners of his lips betraying the ghost of a smirk. John exhaled a dry, humorless laugh, a fleeting glimmer of understanding passing between the brothers. Carl allowed himself a small, knowing smile before standing and adjusting his jacket. "You know," Carl said, his tone laced with wry humor, "I might have just saved you a fortune in court fees." John shook his head weakly, a faint chuckle escaping his lips. "You're one hell of a guy, Carl." Carl turned toward the door but paused before leaving. "I've got to head out for a while, John," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "There's no running from what I am. Sooner or later, the shadows pull me back." "Carl," John began, but his brother raised a hand, cutting him off. "Take care of the boys," Carl said. "That's all that matters." With that, Carl stepped out, leaving his brother in the dim hospital room. Outside, a group of men waited in silence. Their presence was formidable, their expressions betraying nothing but loyalty. One of them stepped forward, holding a sleek black jacket embroidered with a vivid red dragon. Carl took it, a faint smile playing on his lips as he slid it over his shoulders. The weight was familiar, the fabric carrying an air of power and authority. His men watched him with quiet respect as Carl adjusted his cuffs, exuding an unshakable confidence. His gaze swept over the crew, his sharp eyes betraying a steely resolve. "Let's get moving," Carl said simply. With that, the group departed as one, their footsteps fading into the night. Behind them, the faint glow of the hospital lights dimmed into obscurity, and Carl Griffin, once a man trying to leave the darkness behind, embraced it once more. Months after the chaos, John Griffin began piecing his life back together. His sons were his anchor, their laughter and innocence giving him purpose. The divorce was finalized, and the restraining orders ensured his home was a safe haven again. John embraced his role as a father, pouring his energy into rebuilding their world, but whispers of Carl Griffin's actions lingered, casting a long shadow over the family. Carl disappeared into the underworld, his name spoken in hushed tones. Stories of his return to power spread, painting him as a ghost of vengeance, a man who could not escape his nature. For John, the memory of Carl's unwavering loyalty was bittersweet. He owed his brother his life, but at what cost? As he watched his boys play in the yard, John felt the weight of gratitude and sorrow. His brother had walked into the darkness to ensure their light remained. Far away, in a distant city, Carl sat in a dimly lit room, surrounded by his crew. A new chapter of his story was unfolding, one written in shadows and fire. The dragon on his back burned bright, a symbol of the man he had become, and the sacrifices he had made to protect his family. For John, the future was a path of hope. For Carl, it was a road of reckoning. But for both brothers, the bond of family was unbreakable, no matter how far their paths diverged.
My sister went MIA a few months ago. I was close with my sister, but we fell off over the years. She's not involved and gave up her child to my parents. My parents have custody of my niece pre-tween, and she's living with my parents, who feel as though they're getting too old, enough to the point where they can barely take care of her and attend to her needs. I have 2 children already and don't want any more children. My parents invited me over for a sit-down conversation. They explained how it was hard for them to care for my niece due to their age and suggested that I take her in. I declined as they know I have 2 children and don't plan on having more. My parents, mostly my mother, accused me of being selfish and mentioning that I live in a house with 4 bedrooms. She suggested that I should turn over one of the bedrooms to my niece. I told her that wouldn't happen, as I didn't want more children and did not want the responsibility of more kids. I suggested they should give my niece up to foster care or try looking for the girl's mother. My dad agreed to make the search for her mother the priority And if that didn't go well, they would then consider putting the child into foster care. I offered to help with the search, but as I was leaving my parents' house, my mother asked me if I would be able to live with myself if my niece were to get put into foster care. I responded to her by saying, "Of course I would. I feel bad, but more kids come with more responsibilities, and that's not something I want in my life, and I just don't feel that adding another one into the mix is a good idea." She proceeded to call me a selfish idiot before walking away. I shrugged it off. Am I the idiot for not wanting to take in my sister's daughter? I couldn't live with myself if I allowed my nephew or niece to live in foster care. However, I find it odd that your mother's putting this on you. Even if it's getting hard on them to take care of her, can they live with sending her to foster care? You are not the idiot since it isn't your responsibility, but you're not exactly the person anyone would strive to be. This sums it up. OP isn't obligated, but like it's kinda cold. I would give everything to protect my niece and nephew. And even if I didn't feel that way, I couldn't bear to see them disappear into the system. Lately, she's been abandoned by her mother, and now she's about to be abandoned by your parents and rejected by you. Does no one love this poor child? Extended family? Friends? Indeed, someone cares about her. This is heartbreaking. Yeah, mom up and left. Grandparents are ready to throw in the towel, and aunt and uncle can't be bothered. What the heck kind of cold weather family is this? You are the idiot, OP. I understand it's hard. I have 2 kids, and I don't want more. But I agree with your parents. You are being selfish. How could you let a cousin of your children go to foster care when you can care for her? Your parents would surely help you with all 3 children to the best of their ability. It might even be a lighter load for you with that in mind. Why isn't this the girl's dad's problem? Like, why aren't they asking him? Or are they trying to find their deadbeat of a daughter first? Or do the grandparents accept that they've taken on responsibility for the kid and raised her? It's funny that you're also ready to crap all over OP when there are so many other people who have a higher responsibility whom you exempt from that responsibility. OP's parents chose to take on that challenge, but seem to be experiencing an acute FAFO scenario due to their age. That's not OP's responsibility. From a moral standpoint, it does seem a little insensitive to condemn an innocent child to the foster system. Still, there are also 2 other people, the biological parents, responsible for this situation, and there doesn't seem to be enough onus being placed on them to get it together. I, 36 male, was a day 1 adoption. Bio parents never even saw me. My adopted parents raised their family where we were encouraged to be healthy, but not pushed to be crazy about it. For example, eat healthy and walk when you can, but don't necessarily feel pushed to do sports or go to the gym. I do exercise regularly though. Anyway, I've never really had a burning desire to find my bio family, but I received a DNA kit from a coworker as a birthday gift and figured there was no harm. They don't know I'm adopted. What I didn't expect to find was a full-blooded sister. Turns out I have 3 sisters and a brother. She reached out to me first, and after a few months of back and forth and advice from my dad, I drove out to see them over the holidays. When I drove up to the house, I thought I had the wrong address at first. The whole family, siblings, parents, grandparents, etc., were outside waiting for me. They were also all morbidly obese. I don't mean that figuratively. My bio mother's basically Darlene Cates from What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and they didn't get much smaller from there. With that said, I tried to put it out of my mind and focus on the positive of meeting my family. The visit was going okay. It felt a little forced, until dinner. A literal feast was prepared, to the extent that there were more options than I could eat. In the end, I could only manage a plate and a half. The rest of the visit went fine, and I left happy to have met them. It wasn't until I got home that I saw the missed messages. I was accused of being a fat-phobic idiot. Everything from my initial confusion when I arrived to how little I ate was scrutinized. I was told I made everyone feel judged and unwanted. I honestly don't care about people's weight, but I also don't want to pretend I wasn't put off by them at first. In my defense, I wasn't expecting them to be so heavy, but I also think I demonstrated that I wouldn't let myself judge a book by its cover. I don't know. Am I the idiot? No, not the idiot. It sounds like they're the ones with the problem. They might have been mentally surfing on the "it's genetics" thing their entire lives as a reason for being overweight. Seeing you probably brought a harsh reality crash that their issues are from lifestyle over anything else. Sometimes a reality hit like that makes people lash out and blame others, rather than take responsibility for their own actions. I'm sorry for you that they let something that petty be negative for your first meeting of the bio family. This was my first thought as well. There are a lot of people who blame poor genetics on their weight. We can blame genetics on where we put on weight, but it's mostly behavioral decisions that cause weight gain. My ex-mother-in-law would blame genetics, not the extra calories she ate while preparing meals. Being vocal about it was her preemptive defense mechanism. It's funny that she had a very outdoorsy brother and a vegetarian who was being pulled thin. I think it's normal to look confused when meeting bio family after 36 years. You literally have no clue what to expect, even if there had been social media pictures shared ahead of time. Unless you openly called them all fat, eating a plate and a half is a perfectly normal amount to eat. You shouldn't have to force yourself to eat more than what's comfortable to make them feel better about themselves. This really has nothing to do with you and everything to do with themselves. Please don't doubt yourself and do what you must to keep the peace in your life. I was diagnosed with PPD, so I'm not sure if this is playing a part in my actions or not. I've been with my boyfriend for 6 years, and he has a tween son, Jake. I've owned my home for nearly 10 years now. They moved in 2 years ago. Our daughter is an infant. Now, Jake loves his sister. He's always holding her and trying to help. But there's been a massive issue since I had her, with him purposely scaring her, walking up to her and yelling, "Rah!" He thinks it's hilarious when she does startle reflexes, and then laughs when she cries, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare her like that," but continues laughing and purposely trying to scare her, at least 4 times a day. Now, I've always told him to cut the crap. I've told him several times that he's hurting her ears. I've told him several times that it's not funny. And then, not even 3 days ago, I lost my crap entirely and told my boyfriend and him that if he purposely scared my kid again, then they would be evicted and gone from my constant life. I said this because while my boyfriend sometimes corrects his kid, he also tells me I'm overreacting. He said it's natural for kids to think it's funny when babies get startled, and I simply don't understand because I've never been around multiple kids. His son has a half-brother and apparently did the same thing with him when he was a baby. But anyway, I lost it and threatened to kick them out, and at that moment, I truly felt like an idiot because Jake looked sad and just went to his room. But like last night, I stepped out of the room for a minute and my daughter was in her swing. Jake went to sit here, and when I was out of the room, I heard Jake, very loudly and fast, say, "What are you doing?" in a baby voice, and my daughter started screaming immediately. I heard my boyfriend take care of it, and then like an hour later, I went to the bathroom, and the baby was in her seat, and I heard, "Rah!" followed by the baby crying, yet again. So I told them to pack their crap and get out now. I didn't wait for a response, because now I'm trying to calm down my baby. Jake tried apologizing and said it was a habit, and my boyfriend started protesting, saying it wasn't a big deal. I just refused to acknowledge their excuses and told them to leave. My boyfriend sat down on the chair, said he wasn't going anywhere, and that this was his house too. So I said I would leave then and have the cops serve him an eviction notice. He tried begging me to calm down and kept saying, "He's a tween. What do you expect? He's not going to be perfect." I left, and this morning, I filed for their eviction. Everyone thinks I'm being ridiculous here, but Jake refuses to stop, and I'm tired of him purposely yelling in my daughter's face to scare her 4 times a day. Edit. I've also asked Jake why he does this, and he said he thinks it's funny when kids cry. Not the idiot. Yes, he's a tween. He's old enough to know better and to not do it. Old enough to listen to instructions. Would he like it if you startled him every morning? No, he's a tween, but he's being an idiot. And this almost sounds sadistic. The fact that he says he likes making babies cry is alarming. I'm wondering what other behavioral issues he has. Jake thinks it's funny to scare a baby and laughs when she cries. I would consider his behavior abusive, especially since he's been told numerous times to stop. Even after being threatened with eviction, he still did it. It almost seems like a power trip to him. Picking on a smaller person with the express interest of scaring them, it might be that he's jealous because he isn't getting all of the attention. Regardless, he needs help. The key detail is that Jake started to scare your baby when you left the room. It means that he's in control of his behavior. It means that he knows that you disapprove. That's not innocent child behavior. He's acting sneaky and duplicitous. Your boyfriend is a crap parent. It's pretty sad that he's taking Jake's side over a defenseless infant. Throw them out and threaten to call the cops on that little idiot if he does it again. That'll scare him. And your boyfriend can't be trusted to protect her. Seems he's barely older than his son. My kid has to sell chocolate-covered almonds as a fundraiser at school. I would rather just give them the amount he'll raise, but that isn't allowed. So I told my wife to just pay for 2 boxes out of the petty cash I keep in my office. I'll take the almonds to work and give them out to my guys for free. My wife says I'm missing the point and should take my son out to sell the almonds. I think that's ridiculous. I think I have better ways to spend several hours than to harass my neighbors trying to get them to buy chocolate. I told her she could either go out and sell the chocolate or take my money. Now she thinks I'm an idiot because I don't value her free time. She's a stay-at-home mom right now. When our youngest is 2, she'll be going back to work. I work 60 hours a week, not including the commute. Now she wants me to spend hours out selling chocolate? No thanks. My free time is valuable too. Am I the idiot for telling my wife to either take my money or she can be responsible for fundraising? Not the idiot. These fundraisers are complete BS. They combine child labor with the pressure to donate. When I was in school, we did a fundraiser run where we had to get family members to sign documents that they would give X amount per kilometer we ran. The money was supposed to go to a new hall for PE. Surprise, surprise, I'm out of school for almost 10 years now, and there are no signs of a new hall yet. It's about spending time with your kid, not making money. You have better things to do for a few hours than parent your child. Sadly, you think your free time is too valuable to spend with your kid. The almonds are an opportunity to teach your child work and reward for the first time, and you'd rather just hand over the money. Something tells me that your kid is the kind who acts terribly at restaurants, and instead of teaching manners, you use an iPad. Because parenting is hard, and you don't feel like making an effort. You are the idiot and the subpar parent. Your wife is your kid's only hope. I agree. The point is to teach your child. Fundraising sucks, but you're teaching your child life skills. Speaking confidently to strangers, accepting no gracefully, handling money, hard work, and accomplishing a goal for the greater good. None of this is about chocolate. Your wife wants you to spend time with your son. Ignore these idiots. I also work a lot, and using the little quality time I have with my son for running from door to door and bothering people would also be very low on the list of things I'd like to do. You were right. Improve your position by pledging to do something else with your kid. No one wants to flog or buy a $10 roll of gift wrap, a $15 box of chocolate-covered almonds, a $20 bucket of frozen cookie dough, etc. The school district my children attended banned these fundraisers a long time ago. I, 34 male, am engaged to my fiancée, Emily, 31 female. Both of our families are lower class, so we have to pay for the wedding by ourselves. We talked it through, and I suggested we have a more chill, smaller wedding and save our money for a down payment on a bigger house. I make significantly more than her. She's a teacher and I'm a doctor. So I told her, I would take care of the majority of the expenses, like the venue, catering, and planner, if she just paid for her dress and more minor stuff like that. Last week, her parents hosted a party for us before the wedding, and her mom kept making comments about how she can't believe how small our wedding will be, or that we're not hosting it at the fancy hotel downtown that's just so much better and elegant than what I chose. I even overheard her talking to her sister about how small the diamond is in Emily's ring and that it's embarrassing a doctor won't treat her daughter better. I spent about $5,000, which I thought was fair. She just seemed so hung up on the fact that her daughter's marrying a doctor, but the wedding and the ring isn't on a doctor level. Based on what I know, I think she's a little embarrassed about her family's socioeconomic status and was hoping her daughter marrying a doctor would help her improve her image to her friends and extended family. Throughout all of it, Emily looked extremely embarrassed and awkward and kept trying to tell her mom it was fine. And her mom just said, "You need to learn to stand up for yourself." That's when I just lost it and told her mom she could be uninvited from the wedding if she had so many problems with it and was embarrassed by how cheap I was. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. This sounds incredibly exhausting and selfish. She's ruining the atmosphere of a special day for her daughter and for you. I hope this doesn't foreshadow how she'll be throughout your marriage. She sounds like a nightmare. Be sure to get a prenup OP and set clear boundaries about how much access mother-in-law gets to you, your home, your family, plus assets going forward, so you don't get to a point where mother-in-law sees what's yours is also hers, moves into your house, and stuff like that, or starts expecting you to support her financially. Also, talk to your fiancé and ensure you're on the same page regarding how to deal with her mom. Exactly. Mother-in-law is a gold digger. Get a prenuptial agreement. Don't let love blind you. She may have been pushed to find a doctor to marry. The fact is, she told her mom it's okay. She didn't say it was perfect and put her in her place. She may love you, but if she ever decides she's unhappy with doctor's hours, things will be messy. I admire your small wedding. It should be personal, not a waste of money on a big show for people who are only there for free food and drinks. Good luck.